I'm Mongo, and this is Liger Boosa, and welcome to episode 3 of Critical, the history of pro wrestling video games. We have a very special interview on this episode with Dave Wishnowski. We're actually recording this intro several hours later as we are wrapping up the podcast. But we have a very long talk with Dave. He answers a lot of questions. We finally get the story on what happened with him trying to license the Aki engine for PWX, so that's cool. And we get just a whole bunch of other stuff. We cover maybe not everything you want to know, but a lot of what you want to know. And without any further ado, how you doing this week, bud?
I'm a bit sick, but you know what? Not too bad. How are you?
Uh, well, I left a horrible job on Thursday, and I'm starting a better one next week. So I'm doing all right.
Enough is enough, and it's time for a change.
Shout outs to Owen Hart. It would be really nice if FedEx would bring me my ringside collectibles order, though.
I'm sure it'll get
But
there.
we'll take a pause for the cause, as Steve Austin used to say, and then we'll be back with our interview with Dave. So I might as well ask about the PWX programmer stuff first. I've been around long enough to remember when he actually posted like half of that on the board. What was it, like a week after Uprising came out? Something like that?
Probably even
And
quicker, yeah.
I just remember it was really quickly after Uprising came out, and I didn't know about it until somebody on the Axe Bomber board, rest in peace, was like, hey, so I just bought PWX Uprising, and I went to look at the board because he asked about mods, and I saw that post, and I was like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that was a bit, I would say, disappointing, not surprising if you knew what was going on there.
So what was the deal with the PWX programmer? Like, what prompted him to go, for lack of a better term, apeshit on the board?
It even though we put it in writing, I put it in writing. A couple days after Uprising came out, the programmer was very, very much not happy with his share of the revenue, and we referred back to the contract. I was like, dude, you agreed to this. You signed this. You said you had a lawyer look over it so that everything was fair, and we put it in writing so there would be no disagreement, right? But suffice to say, he was not happy that he had signed it, I guess. So yeah, he took the source code for Pro Wrestling X Uprising, refused to hand it over. And so I had to make a decision. You know, I can't go forward with this person because it got really, really ugly, really ugly. That thing he posted was just the tip of the iceberg. I was getting voicemail threats against my family and my daughter and shit. It was gross, right? So had to get my lawyer to politely point out that you're fired. Keep the source code. Start over from scratch if we have to. You know, it was really, really a tough spot to be in, man. It took us years to get to the point where we could even release Pro Wrestling X Uprising, and then to have it go to shit like 2 days after release because somebody decided he didn't know how to read a contract. Oh, it was a gut punch, man. It was a gut punch. So what else can I tell you about that?
I actually wanted to ask this because you did mention it took years for Uprising to come out. I remember around like 06, 07, post, it might have been by you, it was by somebody involved with PWX on a Fire Pro Club. And it seemed like that game was supposed to come out in like 2000, and I want to say 2008. You can't way back machine Fire Pro Club, unfortunately. For a lot of this stuff. Yeah, tell me about it, man. I tried so many save packs that are like lost to history because nobody archived them.
Did anybody save Lois Barfman, the Sunny Bone history? Because that's just epic.
I hope. Now that you mention it, I hope.
Well, yeah. As far as Uprising, yeah, the history of that project was there was a point where we were working. We had a studio open in Vancouver. It was a small studio. We had like a half a dozen people in there, and they were all juniors. Nobody had ever shipped a title before, so boy, did we learn some lessons there. But yeah, I worked really hard raising some funding. We had the studio open around that time for about a year and a half, and we were cranking. And about 3 months before we were supposed to be done Uprising, the funding stopped. We did not get approved for our final round of funding, and yeah, that sucked. That really sucked. I had about a month to try to save the company. Did everything from putting payroll on my personal visa. So, you know, I got to check that bingo box off of common entrepreneur mistakes. So I did that, and I had to lay everybody off and close the studio in December, man, before Christmas. Jesus Christ, that was no fun sitting in my car in the parking lot that morning, knowing I got to go in there and lay everybody off at Christmas time. Yay! Making games is fun and easy, you know. So after that happened, no money, but we had a ton of assets, all these art and animations that eventually made it into Uprising. So over the next year or two, yeah, it was just me and one programmer trying to salvage all the art assets and rebuild the game again from the ground up using the art and animation we had. And that's why there was such a long delay between, you know, thinking we were going to be done and actually shipping it. That was a slow slog for sure. But yeah, we got Uprising out, and then everything went to shit with the lead programmer, and that Jerry Springer show happened. And yeah, that pretty much was the last chapter in Pro Wrestling X Uprising.
I want to note that I actually bought Uprising the second the website went live to buy it.
Yeah,
I
me
still
too.
have it on my
Thank you.
computer.
Thank you, man. I mean, everybody I mean, you guys know what it's like, right? I mean, I've been around since the early Fire Pro days and Axe Bomber and all that stuff, right? And you know, I wasn't the only person going, I'm going to make a video game, and it's so exciting, so exciting. You think, well, hey, I know why the Aki games are good. I know why Fire Pro is good. I've got my nerd cred with my giant gram for my Dreamcast and everything. I'm golden, right? I know what makes a good wrestling game. Surely it's as easy as that. And it's not, man. When I was staring down the barrel of releasing Uprising, I just remember playing the game going, yeah, you know what? It works. Punch, kick, body slam, but this game is fucking terrible. You know, like, this is not the game I wanted to make, right? But I was so surprised when I released it. I, you know, almost hid under my desk waiting for the blowback. And sure, there was a little bit of what the hell is this? But for the most part, a lot of people were like, keep going, because this works. Now, if we could just make it better and more fun, this shows some promise, right? So it was really encouraging, believe it or not, where I thought Uprising was going to be like final nail in the coffin. It was like, shit, well, maybe we should keep going. And that's what we did.
As a player, I was really nervous when I first booted up Uprising, because like I'd seen the videos and I'm like, it looks rough, but like this is the first thing they're releasing. It's not going to be super polished or perfect or whatever. And I played like 3 or 4 matches in Uprising, and I was like, yeah, this is a perfectly fine base. Little did I know the source code debacle was going on. You wouldn't be able to push forward with that exact base. But I will say this: the thing you said about like, I know what makes a good wrestling game because I know all of these games. Have you ever heard the story of, I think it was the 3DO port of Doom?
No, I read the book Doom, which was awesome, but I don't remember that story.
I watched the movie. It was terrible.
Yeah, The Rock was in it.
Yeah. So.
the movie. Oh yeah. Oh god. Yeah.
The guy who bought the like rights to release the Doom, which is like the biggest PC game in the world, on the 3DO, he found a programmer and was like, I know all about making games. By the way, here's a PC copy of the game. Just do it. Make it. I will say this, though, in fairness, Uprising was way more playable than 3DO Doom. Way more.
Damn. Well, you know, it's funny you mention that, man, because I mean, as much as I probably, you know, whatever, market against myself when I say Uprising was a turd, you know, it was surprising that it lacked even some of the most egregious bugs and glitches that you still get in AAA WWE 2K games. You know, like, it's amazing that even our little scrappy team who'd never made a wrestling game before weren't able to screw things up quite as badly as a AAA team can still in this day and age, right? So yeah. But you know, we always tried to live in a really good, what I would call a healthy state of delusion, where we never thought we were a small indie team just making a little wrestling game. We always thought, we're making No Mercy 2. We're making Virtual Pro Wrestling 3. You know, that's what we always thought. We're like, well, hey, man, if those games were so good on that ancient Nintendo 64 console, how hard can it be to make it in the modern game engine on PC? Surely this is just a matter of wanting to make a game and it'll be great. You know, turns out turns out that a lot of the advice I got from experienced game producers in the area, when they told me that a wrestling game was the single most complicated, intricate, and hardest game to make. I mean, look at EA couldn't make one with WCW, right? And they had all the resources in the world. It's not that easy, man. Not that I'm trying to uh, forgive myself too easily for how good some of our games have not been, but god damn, man, it's hard. There's a reason why it's taken this long for there to be a lot of indie wrestling game projects that made it to a first playable.
That's true.
Everybody gets excited. You see, we all know how it goes now. Someone says, "Hey, I'm making a game. It's going to be just like No Mercy. It's going to, da da da." And I'm guilty of that. Fuck, I think I was the original Aki.
I was about to say.
Yeah, right. Like I'm guilty, man. Totally 100% guilty. But now it's become a cliche. I'm making a wrestling game. It's going to have the stats and attributes of Fire Pro. It's going to have the fun factor of No Mercy, and it's like, okay, now make it happen, and then you get those indie devs where the first thing they do is they go and they 3D model their venue, their ring and everything, because that's the low hanging fruit, right? To make some graphics look good. And now with game engines, there's no excuse why you can't put together a playable wrestling prototype in a matter of few months or even a few weeks if you've got the art assets to do it, right? So now it's good. We're seeing like a slew of indie projects now over the last year or two, and they're actually posting gameplay footage from in the game, not just scripted, pre-rendered animations, right? So I predict hopefully within the next 3 to 5 years, we've got like a good half dozen solid released indie wrestling game franchises that can be built on. That'd be great to see because there's room for everybody, man.
Yeah, do you remember it was about a decade ago, it seemed like the indie game scene was kind of bubbling up with, obviously, Uprising, Serious Parody did that 5-star wrestling game, which probably the less said about it, the better. And it felt like a couple of other games had gotten announced, like Action Arcade Wrestling, he was, I think, finally releasing the first one on Live Arcade.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's somebody else I'm forgetting, and it's going to drive me nuts, but it really seemed like we're on the cusp of like a really promising indie scene, because at the time it was just the fucking WWE games. There was no chance we were getting another Fire Pro.
Yeah,
and
right.
like TNA Impact sold they shipped more copies of that game than there were people watching the television show.
Right.
But like,
do you remember the ICW game? Is maybe that the one you're thinking about?
That's the one. Yeah, because they were really like, they had fucking Grado, and they were like, "Oh, it's gonna be just like No Mercy," and now you can't find any fucking evidence of that thing's existence online.
They actually uploaded, they actually uploaded the menu onto YouTube, and then they later on listed it, and it was exactly like No Mercy.
Yeah, like I say, the lowest hanging fruit when you're announcing a wrestling game project is, your graphic mock-ups, your characters. You can do some animations, right? Not too hard to do. Make a good looking menu. You can make an interactive menu, and you can make it almost as web browser. It's easy to do, right? And that's like I'm kind of split on that, because I know when I started Pro Wrestling X, I did the same effing thing, man. I just promoted whatever the hell we could make at the time. It might have just been like concept art of characters, whatever we can do, right? It took us years to prove we had anything playable. And that's the hardest part. It's the hardest part, man. So I'm always a bit suspicious when I see a wrestling game announced. Like I remember game Wrestling Code or something.
Wrestling Code, yeah.
Where it was like, they're a legit game studio, but for the longest time they were promoting all their 3D character models and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's kind of the last thing you do when you're making a wrestling game, is finish off the 3D art assets. The first thing you do is, make something playable, stick figures, punch, kick, fall down, grapple, get back up again, So that makes me suspicious, but at the same time, shit, that's what I did too. So I get when you're excited about your game project, you put out any piece of update or information or media you can make, because it takes a while to get to a playable prototype for sure.
Speaking of playable prototypes really quickly, at one point it was advertised, it might have been for Patreon, it might have been for a Kickstarter, correct me if I'm wrong on either of those, that like the 06 prototype of PWX would be made available. Is that available anywhere, or did that end up not working out, or?
Oh, wow. You stumped me here. 06 playable. I wonder if I was referring to Uprising, or if I was actually talking about, there's so many builds of Pro Wrestling X. I'm going to have to actually dig into my goddamn notes to see what the hell I was talking about there.
I remember from the screenshots, and I don't know if this is what you guys were going for with the look of the venue. It looked kind of like the high school gym from Legends of Wrestling.
Oh, I got you.
Exactly what you're talking. Now I know what you're talking about. I was just looking at video of that. I do have that, and you know what? Thanks for reminding me. I'm going to put that up on Patreon because that needs to be out in the world before it's no longer playable. Because I mean, that game was built to run on XP with a dead game engine, right? So yeah, Jesus, yeah, we got some stuff to upload and share. But you know what? I'm still constantly amazed that anybody wants to see that shit because it's so old and clunky and funny. But I mean, maybe that's the appeal, right? When you look at where we were, Pro Wrestling X for what it is now is exponentially fucking above and beyond what we started with. That's for sure. But I mean, 100 years later, it should be, right?
Right. I can't speak for Liger Busa, my co-host, but I can say like I've wanted to play that since the first time you showed like pictures of it because I was like, oh fuck, I remember seeing screenshots of this. Like, I want to say when like freshman year of high school, and I was like, oh, they're so close to releasing it. I can't wait to play this game.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I don't know if I call them regrets, but man, if I'm known for doing one thing, it's that I mark out over my own shit way too fast, way too hard, and way too early. Like I'll get like that screenshot you showed of the gymnasium. I was like, yeah, great, awesome. Let's put that in the game. How long will it take? A month? Great. Let's do it in a week. I'm going to tell everybody it's coming out next week. So I'm constantly my own worst enemy for promising shit before it's ready.
So I guess we should probably ask because there's bound to be somebody listening to this that isn't old like all of us are and don't remember. The impetus of the Wrestling Gamers United newsletter and PWX was WrestleMania X8 for the GameCube, which I just want to get out in front of everything and say this. When I was like 11 years old, I didn't understand why everybody hated that game. I was like, this is the best version of SmackDown I've ever played. But it was a big deal in the community that they sent. Was that one of the times they sent Sanders Keel out to lie about?
It was. Yep.
Yeah. I've since had the pleasure of personally apologizing to Sanders Keel because I lit him up like a motherfucker about the promotion for that game and SmackDown. Yeah, I was. I laugh about it now, but I was a prick. I was a prick to the guy. But I mean, you know what? When you don't know what it takes to make a video game, and you don't know how video game studios and publishers work, it's pretty easy to take the bait and pile on the guy that they throw out there to take the blame for everything, right? And right. I took the bait. I took the bait hardcore. To me, Sanders Keel was responsible for every bad thing and every bad wrestling game that ever had the THQ logo on it, right? And it's embarrassing to think about that now because now, I look at what his role actually was, and I was like, dude, you rocking a hard place. You were doing your job, and really, what else were you supposed to do? Like he wasn't the developer. He didn't build the game. He didn't make those decisions, but he had to go out there and sell it. Which, goddamn, eh?
Right, and I think it's probably for people that don't have the context. Sanders Keel was really, really hated by the community. And I want to say what actually turned it around was your first podcast with him, where he kind of laid all the facts bare. Like, listen, I know people got mad at me for this. I was told to go out and say that we had ex-Aki devs working on Mania 18, which they did, but you wouldn't fucking tell it by how that game played. And, we have ex-Aki devs working on SmackDown, which they actually didn't, I'm pretty sure. And yeah. People blame him for Nitro and Thunder. He was the guy who had to keep the development team on budget and do the PR. He wasn't the reason those games sucked.
No, not at all. Right. So I thank you for saying that about the podcast, man. It's one thing I wanted to do. I mean, I know wrestling games, we're a small niche, and the amount of people that even know about, the old hockey games and Sanders, even smaller niche, it's been a while. So right. I know it affected him. Like, who likes to be the public face of, wrestling gamer hate? Nobody, right?
Right.
I've been there a few times. It's no fun. So knowing the true story of what he really was and wasn't responsible for, it felt really good to get him on a podcast and finally have that, put everything on the table and say, this is what fucking happened, you guys. Give Sanders a break.
And also, I'm happy, and we're off topic, but I do want to say this. I'm happy he finally squashed the rumor of the fucking No Mercy sequel that was never in development.
All right, I know.
Like there's still going to be YouTube videos going up saying like 10 unannounced or unmade wrestling games, and Backlash is still going to be on there.
Or Armageddon, which is the other name for it, because an engine that struggled to handle 4 characters on screen on the 64 was totally going to be able to do a 6-man Hell in a Cell. Absolutely.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. Right. I know.
So what was it specifically about Mania X8? Like, I'm old enough to remember because I'm old. But for people who don't know, that maybe have never played the GameCube WWE games and might not have the context, what was it specifically about X8 that kind of just sent the community into like angry mob mode?
Well, I think it was, 2 factors. One, it was THQ promising the moon and the stars with that game, right? Promising it was going to be the spiritual successor of No Mercy, and don't worry, just because it's not Aki, don't worry, Ukes has it, it's going to be great. So there was obviously some misreputation there for sure, but also in hindsight, the wrestling game community, we didn't really freaking know what it meant to start a new series on a new generation console, right? We had thought, and nobody told us any different. We watched the progression of wrestling games on the N64, right? You started with, going back to like World Tour versus, and then, Revenge and WrestleMania 2000, No Mercy, and then you see what's going on with Virtual Pro. We saw that progression, and I think everybody just assumed, oh my God, new Nintendo hardware, it's bigger, more powerful, can do more stuff. It should be a very linear progression. We should see Virtual Pro Wrestling 3 should be the first game on GameCube, or No Mercy 2. You know what I mean? Like, it should have everything those games had and more and better. And when we got X8, it wasn't better. It looked a little better, obviously, a new console, but it had less features, less depth, way less stuff in the Creator Wrestler. It just seemed like it was giant steps backwards, and everyone was like, what the hell, man? Like, but again, in hindsight, they were starting from scratch. It wasn't the same team, of course. Like, it makes sense now when you look at it. Yeah, that's that team's first wrestling game on that hardware that they probably only had 6 months to work with before they had to ship. It's actually impressive they even got something like X8 out, really,
Yeah, that people don't remember. That game really did have a super short dev window. Like,
yeah.
SmackDown Just Bring It originally was slated to have like an 8-month dev window too. I don't know what the fuck they were doing in that era.
It's crazy, man. I know I talked a little bit about this with Sanders, but I mean, they had huge teams, huge dev teams, right? And a lot of times they were just rolling forward on legacy code. And I know we all would give them crap for like keep building on broken SmackDown code, when they were making those games. But see what happens when you start from scratch, you get WrestleMania X8. So your choices are, keep building on broken SmackDown code, or start from scratch and get 10% of the game people are expecting with X8. So your choices are shitty and shittier. Honestly, unless they're actually going to make a business decision and say, okay, the next gen console is coming out, we are not releasing a wrestling game for the next 2 years because we're starting from scratch, and that's how long it's going to take. Well, you can't do that. Your publisher needs a game every year.
It's kind of what they've done with AEW Fight Forever, which I'll ask you about in a minute. Back in the day, like 03, 04, AJ Styles was like front and center in a lot of like he was promoting the game. He was on the website. There's the famous, or at the time famous, at least famous to me, picture of him with like the PWX tee on. How involved was AJ with the game?
He was like the technical advisor, right?
He was not involved enough. He was this is like a surreal time for me to talk about, right? Because like this is when I'm raising money to open a game studio and make a prototype, and this is before we even did the prototype for Pro Wrestling X, which I think now that you refresh my memory is the 06 prototype you mentioned. That must be what we're talking about, right? But yeah, I remember reading an article somewhere where AJ was talking about wrestling games and Nintendo 64 and stuff. So I got a hold of him through his manager and just said, hey, we're a little indie team up here. This is what we're trying to do. We talk the same language. We like the same games. And at the time, he was just with TNA doing their weekly pay-per-views. That's how long ago it was, right?
Yeah.
And so I gave him my number. And of course, marking out like an idiot when AJ Styles calls me, right? So he calls, and I'm telling you, man, it was like two old ladies. We talked about wrestling games for like 2 hours, right? And just loved everything. We both knew what worked and what didn't. It was great. And sent him his T-shirt for that awesome photo. But after a couple of months of back and forth, when we were working on the game design document together, he signed a contract that prevented him from working with us anymore. Right. So that sucked because that dude knows his games, man. And I know that him and Smo Joe, their input on the TNA game, and that was supposed to result in a really solid, tight game. But I mean, you even see there, like having advisors, if what they're trying to tell you doesn't translate to the actual guys doing the coding and the art, it gets lost, right? So
Right.
we've learned that having advisors is great. Like Sanders Keel is on our advisory board, and he's great to call. We've had some deals in the works with different companies and that, and he's been awesome because he's seen how those deals go right and how they go horribly, horribly wrong, which is very valuable to have someone help you with the red flags to see, right? So that's what it was like, man, working with AJ. It was so good for him to, we go through and talk about, man, this guy knew every move and every move slot, every reversal, the timing windows. Like, someone needs to give that man a budget to make a wrestling game.
Seems like AEW has had great success with Kenny Omega as I believe his official title is creative director on Fight Forever. Maybe for 2K23 or 2K24, they should put AJ Styles in that spot.
I would agree, except that's such a monolith. I don't know how much difference he could make. It'd be trying to like turn around a cruise ship with a paddle. Like it'd be kind of tough. I think Kenny Omega, haven't followed the AEW game terribly close. I've seen all the media and stuff. I was really worried about it at first, man. That first pre-rendered trailer they made, I was like, what the hell? Like, why? There's no gameplay. It looks weird. And this is Ukes. They've got like decades of experience. Why does it look like a brand new team's just promo trailer? It's so weird, right? But it looks like it's coming together, and I hope it is, because how long have they been doing it now? A couple of years with a new team?
So from what I've been able to piece together, the project starts in earnest in July of 2019, the summer 2019, and officially is done as the AEW game. The deal gets done. Brian Williams said in an interview, I think it was July of 2020. So they're hitting like 3.5 years of actual development, but 2.5 as this project. I was going to ask this before we ask about Lance Storm, because I think that's in my co-host notes.
Yeah.
When you were talking to AJ, was there at any point like an attempt to see like if you could secure the TNA license?
Yep. Yeah. I had probably a 5-minute talk with whoever the hell was running that department for TNA at the time. And it just wasn't going to get done. They wanted so much cash up front. They thought they thought their license was worth perhaps more than it was. I don't know. But yeah, they were only interested if I signed a check and paid them, which I wasn't going to do because frankly, I could barely afford to pay my own crew. So honestly, we've had talks with, I don't think I'm talking out of school here. We've probably been in contact and talked with every wrestling company that was ever significant over the last, 15 years. Everybody's usually really receptive at first. You get going, but then you start talking about what it actually takes to make a wrestling game. And it's a really hard deal to make with a wrestling company because, on one hand, they believe that their brand is worth something. And obviously it is, right? Like an unbranded wrestling game just isn't going to be as easy to sell as one with a TNA logo on it or AEW or something, right? Fact.
Right.
That's true. But us as a company, we're not going to take the risk of working with all these real life wrestlers right now. It's really, really hard to do, expensive when people get, retired, arrested, or whatever, and all of a sudden you've got all these art assets you got to pay for and do. Like, it's rough, man. I had a friend of mine. I don't know if I'll say who but everybody probably knows. But he was about to release a wrestling game in conjunction with another wrestling company, pretty popular one. And about a month or two before that, the company was embroiled in a huge scandal. Their brand became worthless. So here's my friend sitting on this almost completed indie wrestling game he's super proud of, and he can't release it because of the deal he made with the wrestling company. It actually backfired. So the poor guy had to spend months pulling all of this company's branded stuff, wrestlers, names, code, words in the story mode. Everything had to be pulled out and redone, right? And God, what a gut punch. So we haven't tried to work with any real life wrestlers for Pro Wrestling X for that reason. We don't ever want to be slowed down any more than we are, right? By having to remove scandalized wrestlers and companies from our game, right? It's one of the blessings of working with fake characters that we get to make up. I know that the characters in our game will never sexually assault anyone. You know, they'll never rob a bank. So that makes it a lot simpler for us.
Real quick before the Landstorm question. Speaking of negotiations where maybe the number was a little bit higher, I would be doing a disservice to everybody I've ever talked to about PWX if I did not ask this. You guys, it was rumored at one point, I don't know if you've ever publicly talked about it, but the rumor was that you actually approached Aki about licensing the engine for PC games. Any truth to that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%, man. Sure. You want me to just tell you what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. This is back in the day. Again, back after X8 and Aki. I don't think at the point. I think they had made. Were they even making Def Jam games yet? This is how long ago it was, right? There was the Aki USA company. Remember Aki USA? They were a thing for a while.
Yeah.
So I had raised some money in the neighborhood of about, I don't know, it seemed like a lot of money at the time. I think I raised like $75,000 to hire some people to make a prototype and whatnot. And I thought, I'm going to save money. I'm going to get the Aki engine. And at the time, I didn't even really know what Aki engine meant. You know what I mean? I just thought it was something that I could buy and then plug and play my own wrestling characters and stuff. And boom, I've got an Aki engine wrestling game, right? That's how I thought it worked at the time. So I reach out, I get a hold of, I don't even know how I did this, but I ended up talking to the president of Aki USA. I think his name was Jan Q or something at the time. I mean, probably still is his name, but so back and forth an email with him, and I'm trying to explain what we're doing. We're this little Canadian indie company. We want to make this wrestling game, and we do need a little bit of head start. We would love to build it maybe on, I didn't ask for the No Mercy code, but I was like, hey, how about the Revenge code? Maybe we could start there as a base. And he was actually really patient with me and really explained how it worked. And I'll try not to get off track, but this is why I was suspicious about the AEW Aki connection as well. He had told me, he's like, at the time, he was like, look, when you say Aki engine, you mean like the code and the scripts and everything that makes our fighting system, the grappling, the fun part. I'm like, yes, that we want to put it on PC. So he explained it to me and he said, okay, this was made by a small team of, Japanese guys that were just wrestling nerds, right? He's like, they worked in the same room every day. They never documented anything. He's like, there was no technical documentation. There was no design documentation. He's like, all I could do was give you a code dump. I could just dump the code and we could write up a licensing agreement based on that. But he's like, I have to tell you, even the code, he's like, these were all friends. They didn't even comment the code, and where they did, it's in Japanese, And he's like, I've got no translation, nothing for you. All I got is that. And then I was like, yeah, okay, fine. We'll make it work, whatever. And then he's like, okay, how much would you like to pay for this? Right. And I insulted him with a brutally low figure. I think I said $50,000 Canadian, and his reply was fucking brilliant. He said something along the lines of, I think it's best that we end this adventure now so that we might still meet one day and have a beer as friends.
That's great.
I'm like, that is the most polite go fuck yourself I've ever got. Yeah.
Didn't Spike run into like similar issues with Fire Pro? Like Masato Masuda didn't really have any documentation as to like his ideas and his plans. So they was, when they put out World, they were sort of like at a loss at some point. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, didn't they brought on a couple of people who worked on returns that were like programmers, but they didn't have, obviously you don't have Masuda there to kind of lead
Yeah.
everything. It's a similar situation to Fight Forever where they don't have all of the ex-Aki devs. They have Iwashita, the director, and according to Kenny Omega, they have a few others, but the only one we've heard about publicly is Iwashita. And it's so crazy to me. There was no like technical documentation for that engine. That just seems like it would be so standard. But I guess if it's you and your homies in a room, like you all know what everything is anyway. You don't ever expect that somebody's going to want to license the engine or take a look at the engine. So I guess you wouldn't have technical like documentation. But that still seems so weird to me.
Yeah, and that's why. But again, I guess I kind of get it culturally because look, we struggle with the same thing. Like, even our team, if I had to produce a technical document for Pro Wrestling X right now, I'd be sweating because I mean everything exists, in various places across our different crew message forums and file upload sites and stuff, and in emails. Like, and we've only got a 3-person team, so I could imagine that if you're a team the size of Aki back in the day. And they weren't documenting much, that I could see why it would be skeptical to think, that anybody could just resurrect the Aki engine. I don't think you could even do it if you had the original team all together again. It's been like 20 years, right?
Right.
Like, and the thing is too, especially when you look at the youth steel with AEW. Now I'm going to go down the rabbit hole a bit, so tell me to shut the hell up if I really go down the rabbit hole too much. But when
Okay.
that was announced, and they were doing the same old thing, dropping the Aki name and talking about getting the Aki director and the teams, and Ukes has all this experience, but we all knew at the time that Ukes got dropped by 2K, right, the publisher,
Yep.
and previously they've been with THQ. Now the way this shit works is that even if you are the sole wrestling game developer for all these high profile titles with these publishers, you don't own your code. THQ owns all the code for those games. 2K owns all the code for all the games that Ukes ever did for them. So when Ukes, starts with a new company, they can't even go and reuse their own code legally. They have to build
Right.
it from scratch. They have to rebuild from scratch, right? Or they're in deep shit. Which is a good thing if everybody wants a good, nobody wants the SmackDown engine version 20, right? Everybody
No.
wants something new fresh. So it's good that they forced them. It's really, I think it's a good sign that it's taken this long to get where they are. Because anybody who was expecting them just to go open a old CD-ROM with the Aki engine and continue from there, it's just dream on. It's never happening, right? Which sucks.
Right. I was gonna say, I think a lot of the people that like, there's been a lot of mixed messaging from AEW because Evil Uno said like this game is on that engine, and it's clearly not. It looks like a really good modern approximation, like in terms of how the grappling works. They actually have the fucking running grapple where like your guy will throw the arms like way up and then go for the grapple as opposed to like the running hug of like SmackDown. So like it looks like what my mind envisions that engine would look like now, but there are people that still think it's on that engine, and like that's not the case at all.
I don't even think it's physically possible at this point, this many years later, right? I mean, when I couldn't get documentation 20 years ago, then damn well doesn't exist now, So, but I mean, we all kind of, fine for the old days of the old Aki games and stuff, and that's great. And it would be nice to somehow resurrect that. And I know all of us indie game developers, we all think we are. We all think we know what we're doing, but we miss the mark. No one's going to get it perfect the way an individual gamer wants it to be, right? I mean, we boil it down to when we talk about Pro Wrestling X being kind of like, a love letter to the Aki games. We talk about what we think made it fun, and we could be totally wrong. What I think made the Aki games fun was their relative simplicity. One button for strikes, one button for grabs. Tap for weak, hold that button for strong. Now you've got weak strikes, weak grapples, strong strikes, strong grapples, and it's so intuitive you don't even need the instruction manual to have your first match. To me, that's what made those games so intuitive and fun. Somebody else might think something else made it fun and totally disagree with me, right? But I think that's why it's great to have all these companies now making a wrestling game. A lot of the naysayers and whatnot will be like, oh, well, aren't you going to give up now that AEW is making a game? It's like, why? That's like, should Slayer have given up because Metallica released an album? I don't think so. Like, there's enough room for everyone, man. We all know wrestling gamers, dude. We go and we'll spend $200 on eBay for an original King of Colosseum. You know what I mean? If there's a good wrestling game, a wrestling gamer is going to play it. They're not going to choose, hey, there's 6 wrestling games. Which one am I going to play? You're going to play every one. You're going to try them all, right? So I wish there was another 24 wrestling games in development, because there's no excuses anymore. With the game engines you can get, you can go and buy, like, on the Unity Asset Store, you can go get yourself like a pack of fighting animations for $20 to get you started. Whereas back in the day, that took me 6 months and $100,000 to get that far. So more wrestling games. We need more.
I was gonna ask what you thought PWX's place was, since a lot of the things that we're going to get with Fight Forever are also the same kind of things that you guys are also chasing, but you answered my question. I do want to say this, though. We're at a weird impasse when it comes to wrestling video games, where there are the people who think that 2K is absolutely the way wrestling games need to be. It has to be a simulation, whatever the fuck that means. And they will bury anything that isn't a quote unquote simulation. And then there's the rest of us who remember, like, what was it in 2000? There was like 8 wrestling games released in North America, not even counting like the couple that were released in Japan. Like, I had all those fucking games, all of them. And I miss those days, which, to your point, I pine for the days where it's like, yeah, Mayhem comes out and maybe it's not like particularly great, but Mania 2000 is coming out in a month and a half. And if for some reason you don't like that game, ECW game's out 3 months later, and then SmackDown's out like 3 weeks after that.
Yeah,
I'd love to get back to that.
there was variety and there was choices, right?
And that's
Right.
what I like about, if you look at the indie wrestling game scene, it is, I think, even more varied than the mainstream wrestling game scene was back in 2000, right? I mean, you've got, on one hand, you got your Pro Wrestling X, which aims to be what Pro Wrestling X has always tried to be, right? But then you've got Dave Horn's Action Arcade Wrestling, which is like a family-friendly kind of over-the-top cartoony game, which he has fans. He's got a market for that. You've got the Retromania game. Mike and his team, they're freaking great. They got with their 2D sprites, tribute to WrestleFest. He did so good with that. Of course, you got Matt Dickey, who's always going to be Matt Dickey. No other game is going to look like a Matt Dickey game. I hope he never changes his style, because it's so identifiable. And he's arguably got a bigger community and more revenue than every other indie wrestler developer combined. So he played the long game and he won, and then you've got all these other games too. And I apologize to the devs for not knowing all of them. You've got Gakta on Twitter doing his Ultraviolent game. You've got there's another lucha game in the works. There was a female wrestling game in the works. Like, there's so much opportunity for people to make games now that I hope to see a lot more of them, man. It's just like music. Like I say, it's just like music, man. If you like 80s metal, doesn't mean you only listen to one 80s metal band. I would think that'd be sad. There's lots to listen. Everybody does their own thing a little bit differently.
So you did some recording sessions at Lance Storm's school. Was that like motion capture or just video reference for in-game animations? And what was that like?
We never actually got that far. We made a deal with him.
Really?
Our first, we made a deal with him that if we raised X amount of dollars on Kickstarter, that we would go and do the motion capture stuff at his studio in Calgary. Because at the time, I just lived like an hour south of Calgary, so it was perfect, right? But we didn't make that much on the Kickstarter, so that deal never happened. But he was great to work with, total pro, and we negotiated everything, and he was awesome. I was looking forward to it. At the end of the day, we just didn't have the budget to go do it, which sucked.
So you've actually done 2 Kickstarters.
Yeah.
One, I believe, was for Uprising, and then the other was for the current incarnation of PWX. Can you talk a little bit about like the Uprising one and the funding goal and maybe where that all went wrong?
Yeah, I could talk about mistakes for the next 6 hours. Where it all went wrong. With the Uprising one, that one failed. And honestly, weren't ready. You get caught up in the crowdfunding thing, and you think it's just going to be, hey, we're just going to make $1 million and we'll get to make our dream game. Everything will be easy, right? Not so much, right? And honestly, the only thing worse than developing a project like this, especially when you're working with other people, the only thing worse than doing it with no money is doing it with not enough money. Getting started and everybody's like, yay, this is awesome. And then a month later, you're broke again is terrible. Like you don't get as much done as you think you would. You constantly think, well, once we get started, surely our luck will keep running and everything will keep going fine, right? So when we did the second Kickstarter, we learned not to overpromise anything. That second Kickstarter was like, look, we're just trying to raise a couple bucks so we can put together a new playable prototype. It's going to have just 1 or 2 moves, nothing sexy. We just want to get something small and tight and playable put together. And that was fun because we way over delivered on that one. The game that we have on Steam that everybody got access to from that Kickstarter is a shit ton more than 2 wrestlers and 1 move. So that one worked out well. I would say that things go wrong when you get too excited and you overpromise and you just think the world is going to hand you everything on a silver platter because you said so. Where things went right is when we made the hard decisions to really dial it back and make the tiniest promises possible. Because I tell you, man, it sucks to be the guy that is, saying big shit and then it doesn't come down the pipe. Like I hate doing that. To give myself any credit, my name is Dave Wishnowski, and everybody knows where to find me. So if I fuck up and owe somebody money, well, here I am. I'll definitely, I'll take the blame. I'll take the heat. I'll take the responsibility. And in the end, I think that's where things go right. You get a lot of projects people do under pseudonyms. I know I'm going to sound like an old get off my lawn here guy, but man, if you're not even going to put your real name on something, on a big project where you're taking people's money to do it, that's a red flag, I think.
It's a little shady, I agree.
It can be. It's easier to walk away and quit when it's not your real name, right? And if I can circle back, you talk about that PWX programmer thing where the guy, he decided to whatever put his manifesto out after our business relationship ended. But I would like to point out that his name ain't on it. It was at first, and he went and scrubbed his real name off of his own goddamn post. So, what does that tell you, man? You're not even going to man up and put your name on it? Come on,
On that
if it
page,
was all true.
I can say, like, on that page, he talks a lot about the funding from Telefilm Canada. And that was before the original Kickstarter, is that correct?
Oh, yeah, that was back in the day. That was the first scary fundraising I ever did. Because, again, you talk about putting your name on something. That was not a grant or free money. I was able to, it took me about 1.5 years to apply for a loan. Like in Canada, we have different loans available to new media companies and that. I don't know if you guys ever saw Trailer Park Boys, but it's funded by the same loans. It's a cool program. So I went to this Telefilm program and took out a loan and signed my real name, taking responsibility for that freaking loan, So that was scary. That's what the Telefilm thing was. And that was a learning experience too, because a government loan comes with some government guidelines. So you can imagine I was pretty surprised one day when I go to the Telefilm offices and we give them a demo of where the game is, and they immediately say, you have to take out the steel chairs. You can't have women getting hit by men. Wow. You can't even have women in the ring with men. I'm like, come on. So that was a fun fight.
I do want to ask something though, because I would feel like I didn't get everything answered that I wanted. There's a picture of you with the Xbox 360 cover for PWX that came out, I want to say around E3 0506.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the name of the company that was like attached to it as a publisher. Was that also related to the Telefilm stuff, or was that a different company?
No, that was going to be Telefilm. We were going to self-publish. And we were talking to, this again, wow, way back in the day. Up in Canada here, we got Electronics Boutique. Do you guys have those down there? I don't know. They're like
Canadian.
We
well, yeah, we were talking with them.
Yeah, AB Games and now GameStop.
Yeah, it's
So at the time
GameStop in the States now.
we were gonna do a physical release through EB Games, and holy shit, man! It's true what they say. You got to buy shelf space, man. It's crazy. Like it would have cost so much money to put Pro Wrestling X on their shelves. It was doable, totally doable, but you'd never make your money back just on what they wanted you to pay to rent, quote unquote, shelf space. It's nuts.
Can we talk about the current build? Because I did play it a few days ago.
Cool.
I really like the Hallows Eve arena. You know, it takes me back to like Halloween Havoc, obviously, and when pay-per-view stages mattered, it felt like you were, you're paying for a big show. It made it feel more special. So I thought that was really cool. And I did like a lot of the animations in it, like the choke slams, the power bombs, all looked really good. Um, there was some issues. I mean, obviously it's a game in development, so there was like a bit of jankiness and camera movements and stuff like that. But I think there was some fun to be had. But I do have to ask about some of the signs that were in the crowd. Um, there was a few signs that popped up quite a bit that I thought were a bit strange. There was one that says, "Look at the clitoris is the devil's doorbell." There was references to midget porn and like
Yeah,
your wife's name ain't the only thing of hers in my mouth, and I was like, why are these signs in the game?
I will tell you. This is. I'm glad you asked that, and I'm glad I already talked about how I take the blame for everything. I will take the blame for every inappropriate sign in Pro Wrestling X because I get to do almost nothing on this game. Right? I'm not a programmer. I'm not an artist. I'm not an animator. My only creative outlet is every once in a while I get to pop a few crowd signs in the game, and I am emotionally a 14-year-old with a South Park sense of humor. So to me, it's almost like putting signs like that in the game is my middle finger to everybody telling me that I had to be proper. I'm a CEO now. I can't have a sense of humor. You know what I mean? Like, you got to behave. You got to keep everything family friendly, just in case the WWE comes calling for us to make a game for them. You know, and things like that. So I have, if I've got many faults. One of them could arguably be if you tell me I can't do something, I will do it out of spite. It gets me into trouble a lot. So sometimes I'll just be sitting there shooting the shit with some friends. Somebody will say something really crude and funny, and I'll be like, that's a crowd sign, you know?
Right.
So, yeah. So all of this, you know, it looks like trying too hard to be funny. It's actually the opposite. I'm just like spewing crap into crowd signs, and that's my creative outlet in the game. In fact, there's only one guy in the crowd that holds those signs, and we call him PWX Sign Guy. And they're probably going to skin him to look like me just to make sure everybody knows they're my fault. All those signs.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things, like, why we're even having this conversation is when you posted on Twitter and you said, this isn't your baby brother's wrestling game, and I was like, if my baby brother was born when this game was announced, he would be 20 years old. And then
Yeah.
I brought up the whole thing about, like, when you talk about blood and like swearing and boobs and violence in general, and I think of that sort of like promotional style, that to me is like very Attitude Era, very ECW, like 97 to 2002 or something like that, and Jerry Springer and stuff like that. And I was a teenager at the time, and I guess my point being is like, modern day you can access anything on the internet. There's like nothing that's shocking anymore. So to me, it sort of felt like that sort of thing is like in a shock value, and I'm just like, this isn't relevant anymore. Does that make any sense?
It actually really does make sense. I had a pretty huge falling out actually with an old crew member years ago about this very subject. And I don't really have all my thoughts too coherent on it, but I'll just try to explain to you where we're coming from, and then hopefully somebody can make sense of it, right? But we, when we were making Pro Wrestling X, in the early days, it was about what can we do to make this game as appeal to as many people as possible, because we got to make our money back and it's a business and all this shit, right?
Yeah.
So we would deliberately dial it back. Everything had to be family friendly. Blood had to be really not much at all, and everything like that. No swearing, nothing like that, right? And I got to tell you, I don't know if it's because most of us on the crew, especially now, all have backgrounds as musicians or artists or people that create things, right? And it's almost like a reaction to, like I say before, to being told what you can't do. So sometimes, a lot of times, I push back against that just to kind of, I know, like, it's nothing's extreme anymore, right? I
Yeah.
get that. But to me, it's important to keep, you talk about what makes Pro Wrestling X stand out from other stuff and whatnot. Well, obviously, wrestling games have a lot of things that are in common and carry over. But one thing I wanted to make sure was that we never, ever, ever got pigeonholed into like a PG sort of thing where we weren't allowed to be ourselves and express ourselves, even in stupid freaking crowd signs, adding exploding pumpkins to the game just because we want to, making snarky comments on the tombstones just because we want to, having creative control over this project, especially when we almost lost it a few times doing deals with other companies. It's just something, it's almost like we have to flex that muscle, and we have to do things that we know are pushing the boundary, or at least used to push the boundary, because we never want to be afraid to go there when we want to. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? It's like we're a little 3-man team right now, and we don't consider ourselves like a software developer. We're like just a punk band, but instead of playing music, we got a wrestling game that we do, you know?
Yeah.
So we went from trying to make the kind of game that would make our funding and everybody else happy to now we're just making the game that we want to play, And I love Grand Theft Auto sense of humor. I like Rick and Morty still, that kind of shit. So even though I'm not as smart and funny as those people, I still like to express that kind of crap when it comes to me, right? So having this Pro Wrestling X playground, it's it's very, very important to me that it remains 100% creatively in the control of myself and the crew. And so that's why every once in a while things will bubble up and you're like, wow, did they really need to wrap that Christmas tree in barbed wire and beat the shit out of the guy in that video? No, but it was fun.
Yeah. And like I think that a lot stuff with weapons is cool. Like I like that creativity with weapons. Yeah, it's just the science personally for me. I was just like, what the fuck? But I understand where you're coming from. I want to talk about, like, I was reading an interview with you, and you were talking about, previous funding, like loans you had taken and stuff like that, and you went to the bank and like the money had pretty much dried up, and they said, what do you want to do with like the last 10 cents in your account? And I think what did you take it home and frame it? Is that correct?
Yep, I'm looking at it right now on my wall, man. That was definitely a moment where you have to laugh or you're gonna fucking kill yourself, right? Because I went from having, I raised and spent close to $450,000 by the time Uprising was released, and my name was on all that shit. Like I took responsibility for all that money, and so to actually go to the bank one day and see that everything's dead, Uprising came out, and it did what it did, and I've got no crew anymore, and I've got 10 cents left in the bank account. Well, took it home, framed it. I was like, all right, guess we're starting over with 10 cents. That's 10 cents more than I had the first time I started. So consider it a head start. And went from Uprising to what we have now on Steam. And yeah, man, wow. I'm just thinking about it now. It's a cliche when people say it's not how often you fall down, it's how often you get back up again. And it could be argued that it might not be a healthy character trait to never quit and never give up, right? Maybe I watched too much Dora Explorer with my daughter when she was a girl. Never give up, never give up.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I mean, you talk about $450,000. That's a hell of a lot of money. That's
You
more money
know,
than, I will ever see ever at a single time. Or, it'll take me years and years to gather that much money. So I'm thinking, like, what is it that after all that money that still motivates you to this day to like, I still want to make this?
because we love making it. I honestly love working on this game, even if some days all I get to do is write a stupid crowd sign, or maybe our animator only had time to animate a taunt that week, or the programmer, all he could do is fix a menu bug. Every time something improves, the most baby steps, like I say, I mark the hell out. Like sometimes I'm sitting here like howling with laughter at how awesome it is that we've got, a new venue or a new match type or animations or reversals or whatever. It's really, really fun to do. And I think that's why a lot of these people, they quit. I've seen, God, how many Kickstarters have we seen where people put up their videos and they're like, yeah, we're going to do it right this time. And, we're not going to take advantage of people and blah, blah, blah. And we know what makes a good wrestling game. And yeah. And then they don't reach their goal and they fuck off and they go away. And you never hear from them again. It's like, wow, you really cared. No, you didn't. Whereas the Pro Wrestling X crew, yeah, we've had some good funding over the last, few decades. But we've actually done the most when we had the least, because we're doing it because we love the act of actually developing the game. If you're doing it because you're thinking, wow, one day I'm going to have this indie wrestling game out and everyone on the internet will love me, great. But if you don't love the actual process of developing a game and it's long and frustrating and hard, you're never going to get there. So I think that's why, when people look at Pro Wrestling X and they're like, dude, stay down. Why? Why are you keeping going? Like, it's been forever. Aren't you embarrassed, humiliated? It's been this long. And no, I'm fucking grateful that I've been able to do this for this long. And I've attracted, the crew that I have right now. God love them, man. They're freaking amazing guys that, they don't need to be working on this project either. They've got AAA jobs working for other companies during the day, right? They do Pro Wrestling X because they love it too, whether it's a payday or not a payday. And why would I would never want to stop doing that? I mean, the saddest day for me would be if Pro Wrestling X ever, considered itself done and there was nothing left to do. That would be sad, man. In fact, I've often thought, if Pro Wrestling X, whatever, final version is released and it's great and wonderful and everything the entire community wants, and we make millions of dollars, but in order to get the millions of dollars and accolades of a finished game, if I would have to trade for that the memories and the people that I've met and the friends and everything I've been through over the last years, if I had to give up the memory of all that just to get the success, I wouldn't take the deal, man. I honestly wouldn't. It sounds like a bullshit thing to say, but the adventure of where we started with that stupid fucking Wrestling Gamers United newsletter, I'm on like newsletter 999 now. And you can look at that two ways. Either like, holy shit, dude, really? You're 999 and you still haven't got a complete game out? Or you can look at it like, holy shit, kept going for 999 and the game keeps moving along, right? You do it because you love doing it. So why stop doing it? And the money sucked, but then, I've been able to also pay my crew really well when times are good. And that feels fucking great, And honestly, I've been down and out a few times. I've been homeless. I've been bankrupt. Nobody dies, like every day you wake up, you got a chance to take one baby step towards what you're trying to do. And as long as you keep that kind of attitude going, it's fine. But if you're going to be affected by people that talk shit about you, and I used to be, believe me, man, I read some comments back in the old Fire Pro Club days about Pro Wrestling X that made me fucking ouch. They hurt. They sucked, right? But once they get so bad, you just got to laugh them off and not let it get to you, right? I think once somebody said Pro Wrestling X was worse than Hitler raping his face, I had to laugh, thinking that's amazing. I'll never get a worse comment than that. So brush it off and keep going, right?
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, I've made some comments about PWX over the years, but I don't think I've said anything that bad.
Well, have you? The thing is, though, like, and I don't listen to the podcast, but I mean, yeah, you said some critical things. I guarantee you, I haven't heard anything critical from the community, you guys included, that the crew hasn't said to themselves.
Right.
Like, we know, we're quite aware, so we don't mind. In fact, it's not a bullshit marketing, sales, community management line, whatever douchebag thing. We like getting criticism because we are so close to this project. Sometimes we can't even tell where it needs work because we are so familiar with it. You know what I mean? Like as an example, I got used to knowing that I couldn't navigate left and right on the menu. I could only go up and down. But I got so used to doing that, I forgot that, Jesus Christ, you should be able to navigate left and right. I just got so used to not being able to do it. that when people start complaining, going, dude, your menu's wonky. I'm like, fuck, yeah, you're right. Thanks for reminding me. It is wonky. I
Yeah.
just got too good at working around it, you know?
I'm curious as to like what the thought process was when someone said, "Well, why don't you go and make your own game?" Because I feel like everyone's got a response like that, a few times in their lives. And my thing is always, well, fuck, I don't have any money. So what was the push to you? It'd be like, okay, now I'm gonna start doing this.
You know, I was just really, really pissed off about WrestleMania X8. I just thought, wow, how, like, the one thing I could always count on was, if you have a bad day, I could flip on a good wrestling game and play it, right? Like, some guys, they watch football, they collect expensive scotch and watches and shit. I like wrestling games, for better or for worse, right?
Yeah.
So I was so choked at thinking, really, really, the one thing that I look forward to, at the end of a hard day is gone. So when I was complaining about that on the old GameFAQs boards back in the day, like you say, somebody said, why don't you make your own damn game if you think you can do it, right? And I just thought, well, fuck, how hard can it be? How hard can it be? Right? Well, it turns out quite hard. But I had some encouragement. I mean, I lived in Vancouver at the time, and I had friends who worked at Electronic Arts and Ubisoft and different companies, right? So I was so lucky that I could just bring up a friend, who worked on the latest Call of Duty or something, say, hey, I need some advice. I want to make a wrestling game, and a lot of guys were really, everybody was encouraging. They said, yeah, you can do it, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to be hard. And this is the process and design documents and blah. But to me, it was like so fun. The idea of making a wrestling game was just like, really? Playing them is great, but if you really love something, make one, And I just thought, wow, if only we could put together all these great ideas, because like every other wrestling game developer wannabe, I had a binder full of ideas already, my secret ideas. So getting the encouragement from people to do it was cool, and learning how to even raise the money to do it, because I knew what was possible with one person. And I was like, I'm not a programmer. I'm not a 3D artist. I could learn how to do this, but I'd be 5-10 years behind everybody else. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm going to learn how to put together a crew, and we're going to put a band together, man. And we'll do it that way. So it was just like, hey, I got to hire a crew. What do I got to do? Ask my accountant. He's like, well, you're going to have to raise money. Great. How do I raise money? Well, you got to incorporate a company. What the fuck is that? So he walked me through that. Right. Like I should have bought a book, How to Open a Game Studio for Dummies, but that book didn't exist. So you kind of had to write your own, right? But man, I learned how to do shit I never thought in a million years I would learn how to do. I came from a very, very lower middle class family financially, like sometimes, my little brother's birthday, we'd wrap up my toys to give to him because he wouldn't know the difference and the family couldn't afford anything, right? So I had no experience with money. So learning how to raise money to open a game studio, I'm like, who would give some asshole like me with a 2-year diploma in jazz studies money to open a game studio, right? But I got good advice. I learned how to do it, did the whole PowerPoint presentation, built a business plan. And to me, that kind of shit was fun. It was like working behind the scenes at Disneyland or something to see how like getting a video game made, what it took to me was like fucking adventure and awesome. And I was like a pretty shy kid, When I was a little kid, I would cry if an adult tried to talk to me. So here I am now. I've got to go and like give presentations and ask strangers for thousands of dollars. I mean, sick to my stomach at the thought of it, but I got used to it and I got to doing it. And I tell you, man, that first time I did a presentation during the prototype phase of Pro Wrestling X, and the investors were very gruff. It was like Dragon's Den almost, right? Like no sense of humor, nothing. I gave my little speech about wrestling games and Canada, and Stampede Wrestling to try to get them on board and stuff. Did my little thing, and I tell you, the first time that one old guy just turned to his partner and said, "Give him 10 grand." Holy fuck, man! I don't think I'd ever borrowed $20 off of someone before then, right? I remember driving home with my window rolled down, just screaming woohoo out the fucking door. A perfect stranger trusts me with 10 grand of their money. I must at least sound like I know what I might be able to do with it, right? And here we are.
You were talking about Stampede there. At one point, you were doing like a history of Stampede project.
Yeah.
Was that a virtual museum? Was that the same thing?
Yeah. It was back in the day, this was when Bret Hart's book came out, his cartoon World of Wrestling, right? And I read some early press things with him where he mentioned that the building, the Victoria Pavilion, Stampede Pavilion, was scheduled to be torn down because it's it's old building. If you've seen pictures of it, it's just concrete and dirt, right? Um, and so I was like, well, damn, that's no good. I go, I got a little video game company here. Maybe we can at least go in there, take some pictures, and recreate the interior of the building for a game or something, at least preserve it that way. And this is before you could 3D scan interiors of the building in 5 seconds, right? So using that as my excuse to get a hold of Bret Hart, I talked to the people that ran the Calgary Stampede who owned the building. I said what I want to do, and I reached out to Bret Hart through his manager to see if he could support us, get a letter of support or something. So that's how I got to meet Bret Hart, and he worked with us a little while doing some character design stuff on the game too, which was cool. But he got us access to the Victoria Pavilion and everything, and he was awesome. But it turns out that they decided not to tear the building down, and it's still standing. In fact, Bret Hart's sons just ran a show there last week. Just ran a wrestling show there. That Bret was there, and the rest of his brothers and that. So the building's still there. They didn't need it to be preserved. But yeah, it was a cool little opportunity.
That's is that dungeon wrestling that they call it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a neat idea to preserve the building in the game. I saw that Ultra Pro Wrestling had I forget what arena it was, but it was like where ECW had ran before that has since been torn down. That Mongo used to go to that they were recreating in their game. So I think that's really neat. In regards to the current build, so I feel sort of odd asking this, considering
Do it.
the
Do it.
development.
Do it. Do it.
Well, the development time of PWX, but is there a time frame in your head where you're like, this is at this point, this is where we'll be happy with the game, where we've got sort of everything figured out, and then we're looking at doing, like post-release stuff. Is there a time frame in your head right now?
Yeah. 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I thought we were going to have this polished up because we know where we have to be disciplined,
Right.
and then we're not disciplined, right? Like we know that we need to stop creating content for the game and just polish up and tighten up the gameplay. Get rid of those little janky animation movements that are there sometimes. Tighten the camera movements that could be better, right? Like we don't need to add more match types. We don't need to add more weapons. We don't need to add more characters. We need more moves animated to flush out the create a wrestler and stuff. But time frame wise, we wanted to get it to at least a tight 1.0 playable with no more content before newsletter 1000. Well, that's only
Okay.
one newsletter away, right? But dude, this is where human nature comes in. We know what we have to do, but goddamn, isn't it fun when you have a new idea and you're like, this will only take a day.
Yeah.
This will only take a day. Let's do that. Let's put the physics on the tombstones again. That won't take long. And little things like that, right? And the thing is, every time you add something to the game, no matter how little and inconsequential you think it is, huge potential it's going to break something else, right?
Mhm.
Like for instance, we added we're working on activating the multiplayer, right? Because we have it's all working under the hood, multiplayer and that. But in order to do that and activate the online multiplayer, we wanted to incorporate a split cam feature, right? For when people are on opposite sides of the arena,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So we did that, but now because we did that, well, now we've got to tighten that up because it's a little bit too loose and
I
cuts in a
was
bit too early. And
I was gonna
yeah,
bring that up actually. Yeah, because I was playing the scaffold match, and as I was going up the scaffold, it had that split cam, and it sort of messes with the controls a little bit, and it was a bit.
messes with them a lot because
Yeah.
controls are
Yeah.
relative to the camera position,
Yeah,
right?
and it's a
Yeah.
bit disorienting when I was playing it. So.
Yeah, it's another example. Like it's a perfect example of something that we needed to do, but we always ship things before it's ready. Because we constantly use the early access excuse, like, hey, this is in development. You look behind the scenes when we release stuff, it's not going to be quite done yet. So it's kind of cool that you get people's feedback while the game is still in early access. But my God, we've been in early access too long. We could have been out 2 years ago if we would have had the discipline to stop adding shit and just polish up what we have, right? So that's kind of what we got to do now, man.
That went up in where early access was like 2000 and was it 2014?
something like that. And when we, but also like, wow, how far we come. Cause in 2000, when we got to early access, there was only 2 wrestlers, no menu. It booted right into the match. 2 wrestlers, a ring, no crowd, no audio, punch, and a brain buster. We just
Yeah.
called it our brain buster simulator. That was it. I don't even think you could win a match. So to get from that point to what we got now, I mean, you realize we never really had a huge, massive update. They've all been incremental updates. You know, some of them pretty significant, obviously, right? But man, when you think that we got here like one frame of animation at a time, one texture, one line of code, and very seldom was anybody working full time on the game. We've had a few good growth spurts where we had a few good months of development with funding and whatnot. But man, when you look at Pro Wrestling X and you realize that's one programmer. One programmer did all that shit. One artist did everything from the menu art to the animations to the particle effects to the venues. Like everything. One fucking artist. Not like one animator, one modeler, one graphic designer. No, it's all the same guy. Right? It's quite a feat, man. So when I look at AEW and I'm thinking, well, you've got like, you know, probably a crew of 50 people who've been working at Ukes forever. Yeah, that must be nice. I'd love to have those resources too, man.
So I mean, originally when you started, you had like artists working out of Los Angeles, right? And they came up with like characters like the fanboys and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
Way
we
back
had
in the day.
some concept artists, Mel and Jinx Hauser. They're awesome. Yeah, they did all those early character designs. And yeah, even when we got the first little bit of prototype funding, I went through the online database of like video game, you know, contractors, and I found someone who worked on Legends of Wrestling. I was like, "Hey, you worked on Legends of Wrestling. We need character models. How much?" So he charged us $1,000 to do our first Tyrador character model for the Uprising game, and told us some fun stories about Legends of Wrestling. Actually, you know what? I heard you guys talk about this when you talk about that glitch where they try to slap the hands of the audience and the audience doesn't slap back.
Right, yeah.
That's actually not even a glitch. They just never finished. He's like, yeah, we
Oh,
were supposed to. He's like, yeah, we were gonna have so like Hogan or whatever would reach out and like smack the hands of the audience, but then they moved the deadline up and wouldn't let us animate the audience slapping hands back. So I was like, yeah, you slap midair, and he's like, we wanted to finish it, but they wouldn't let us. So yeah, one little
nice.
story. Original Legends of Wrestling game too,
Yeah,
because you wonder like why is RVD in Legends of Wrestling at the time, right? Because it was supposed to be the next ECW game.
that's right,
That's
yeah.
what it was supposed to be. So yeah, kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, if he told you any original like stories from the original Legends of Wrestling before it was Legends of Wrestling, because I think that's what I heard, that it was ECW, and then it was supposed to be like an indie wrestling game, and there was talk about like crowd fighting and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, they actually had a scaffold match
oh
in
really?
development for that. Yeah, I saw a screenshot of it. They were going to do it, but they just got the art done. They never had it functioning, right? But yeah, it was supposed to be an ECW game, and that's why they had the scaffold and all that stuff, right? They were going to do that. The only story I heard that breaks my fucking heart was when they were talking about licensing all the different wrestlers, right?
Hmm.
They had some of the ECW guys already because that contract extended. That's why they were able to use it. But he said the people running the company at the time, and I think you might have heard the horror stories about the executives who ran that company kind of into the ground, right? Um, he was like, they would pay like a shit ton of money to some wrestlers for their license, right? Um, and he was like, Jake Roberts at the time was in a pretty bad spot, right?
Yeah.
Financially, health, and drugs. And he said they got Jake's license for the game for just a couple $100 because he was desperate,
Jesus.
and they took advantage of him like that.
Oh,
Can you believe that shit? Isn't that just gross, man?
that's
Fuck.
yeah, that's fucked up.
Like I think one of the reasons I bought that game is because I wanted to play as Jake. Yeah.
You've got me curious now, though. I mean, you don't happen to have that scaffold match screenshot, do you?
I don't, buddy.
I'm
That was like
I'm s-
20 years ago when I was hiring the guy.
I'm such a sucker for like all like lost media. Like we constantly bring up Mayhem too. So
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, you know what's funny? You mentioned that too. I was commenting on somebody's Facebook post, like a band, And they got back to me when they saw my username Pro Wrestling X and said, "Hey, Pro Wrestling X, I was a tester on Mayhem 2 or something like that." I'm like, "What?"
What?
I go, I need to talk to you. Yeah.
Oh
I
no, my head now. This is too much information today now.
I went through like a thing at the beginning of quarantine where I was like, there's no way the WCW 2000 from PSM is Mayhem 2. It doesn't make any sense. Mayhem 2 had like the blocky kind of, you've seen the wireframe animations of the heads, I'm sure, Dave.
Yeah.
Where they look blocky and cartoony and like a fucking hockey game. But in PSM, Mayhem 2000 just looks like a way prettier backstage assault. And then actually, because of your podcast with Sanders, I pieced the whole thing together that they canceled the PS2 backstage assault because Aki became available. And if the Evil Empire had not done what they did in March of 01 and instead waited till like 02 or 03 or just never did it, we might have had a PS2 Aki game with the insane roster they had in 2001.
Right? I know. At the same time, like I say, one of the people that was giving me advice at the time worked at EA. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I worked on a WCW game." I was like, "Really? Which one?" Thinking it was one of those, famous cancel ones. He's like, "It was a card game." I'm like, what the hell? And he again, I don't think I have them, but he shot me images. They were making a WCW PC card game at the time, too, over at EA that never went anywhere.
Sort of like with Authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly like with Authority. But yeah, he sent me the art that he was working on. Had some Sting cards and whatnot. It was interesting. So yeah, it makes you wonder like how much shit has been in development that will never see the light of day, right? That's the stuff I want to play, man.
You know what I want to see is the fucking Game Boy Color version of No Mercy that was being developed by Aki. Hell, I want to see the Natsume developed version too that got canceled. But I want to see what an Aki wrestling game on the Game Boy Color looks like, because that has to be like a trip.
How far did they get? I mean, I know that you had the option in the No Mercy menu, right, to swap your data with that game that never existed. But how far did they get? Do we ever see screenshots or any gameplay from that?
No, I know people that swear they saw a screenshot of like Cactus Jack climbing a ladder, which is how I know it's bullshit, because how you can do a ladder match on the Game Boy Color. Right. But the rumor was Aki started the game and they got a couple of months and they got very short way into development before the decision was made to scrap the Game Boy Color functionality and move on with Natsume before they just fucking canceled the game wholesale.
You know what, man? And that actually reminds me of something that kind of picks my ass a little bit. Sometimes when I get grumpy, I get pissed off at the Spike, Human, Aki, all those companies, right? Because I'm like, there were these teams that know how to make a wrestling game. They lost their publishing deal or whatever. I'm like, why didn't these people start an indie development company and do it? Why did they leave it up to us? It almost feels like we were abandoned by our parents. You know what I mean? It's like, why did they leave it to us to fucking figure out and have to deal with fucking funding and bankruptcy and online hate and shit? Aki could have started a development company. The guys at Spike, they could have. Like, where's Suda? Fucking god damn it. Anyway, that's my rant.
Oh, I just want to bring something up very quickly, since we're talking about unmade wrestling games. In the newsletter a few times, you've referenced the King of Colosseum engine in the European publisher.
Yes.
What happened with that?
That was supposed to be the one guy that was working on, I want to say 5-star.
Oh, okay.
Over in Dublin. I think it was him. They had pulled some money together and they were going to work on reskinning and porting that with a new license. Never happened though.
Jesus Christ!
I don't
know if the North American market in particular could appreciate King of Colosseum, even if it was skinned as an ECW game. I honestly think it would bomb. I don't think people would appreciate the depth and speed and pacing of King of Colosseum. I could be wrong, though.
Do you remember when King of Colosseum was listed on like GameStop's website in like early 2003?
No, I was living in Vancouver at the time and had to pick it up bootleg at the Richmond Night Market. That was exciting. I felt like I was going to a drug deal.
So I remember in like, I want to say the spring of 03, because this is around the time that the GameCube the GameCube Fire Pro was announced by BAM Entertainment. they were also going to be releasing King of Colosseum according to GameStop's website because they were listed as a publisher. And then fucking BAM Entertainment, I guess, disappeared into the night and we never got either. But I've always wondered, like, how well does King of Colosseum 1, either disc, you'd probably have to do red over here because there's more identifiable wrestlers to the Western audience.
Yeah.
How well does that actually do in 2003?
Yeah, I don't know, right? I think King of Colosseum, I think most North American gamers would look at that and think, okay, this is a really good heavyweight wrestling, game, the pacing of it. But I don't think, maybe I just don't have a lot of faith in the general wrestling game community. But I mean, look how many people shit on Fire Pro because they don't understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I honestly think, I don't know if the word dumbing down is the right way to say it, because it's not like the 2K games are terribly, simple to pick up. But yeah, I don't think King of Colosseum ever would have done well here, sadly.
I was actually just about to say, I find it hard to believe that the modern American wrestling gamer would have trouble with a game that requires you to press like 4 buttons to do a grapple.
Right? But just to get the timing right, to explain to people, well, there's different grapples and different timing. And they're like, why? Well, because it's more fun. No, it's not. That's a conversation I had. Yeah.
Listen, if they had sold it as Power Move Pro Wrestling 2 and had like Fabulous Lance and Malibu Mike,
Goddamn right.
I think it would have done really well.
Lance Duloc, he gets all the ladies and some of the men.
Hell
I'll never
yeah.
forget it. I actually, so I got a flip top for my Slim PS2 in 05, and I actually got King of Colosseum 2. I'm sorry, I got my flip top. I got KOC 2 a couple weeks earlier. I got my flip top in the mail the day SmackDown 06 came out. And my friend who had never played anything but the American games, I sat him down and we learned how to play King of Colosseum together. And basically, after like a week of playing the game, that's like the only wrestling game he wanted to play. He did not want to play SmackDown unless we were just doing stupid shit in GM mode.
That's interesting. And because, King of Colosseum is like a game where you really do have to work your way through your opponent, right? You're not going to finish that game by getting a lucky finisher in the first 10 seconds. It's not going to happen, right? So that's why I like the pacing and the fun of it that way, man. I remember when I got King of Colosseum, like I say, I had to go buy the bootleg discs, the Richmond Night Market. So that was kind of cool. But then I didn't have a modded PS2 to play them, right? So I had to find somebody in Vancouver to mod the PS2. So that was fun. And I did. So I drove to the sketchy part of town, and this old guy was in his garage with his chain smoking with a soldering iron. And he's like, "You come back in 1 hour." I'm like, "Okay, I guess I'll come back in an hour, and hopefully you'll still be here with my PS2 and my games." But I came back and I opened the door, and there's the intro for King of Colosseum, like running on the TV. I just remember sitting there going, "This is the most amazing fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. This game looks epic," right? And then just like Fire Pro, I rushed into it without reading the instructions. I'm getting my ass handed to me. I don't know how to play this game. It doesn't play like any other wrestling game I've ever played before. But you're having a good time when you're sitting there going, I haven't won a match yet, and I'm having so much fucking fun. I love this game.
The thing I love is when everybody tells their first time I played KOC 2 story, everybody universally, myself included, expresses some frustration with the grappling system because like nobody played Soul of Champion on PlayStation.
Right.
I did.
Like very few people played it. Well, I mean, I own it, but I got Soul of Champion like 2 years after, or a year after I played KOC 2. So like going from KOC 2 to that was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. It's
but like most people didn't play Soul of Champion. So like the first time they play KOC, even if you read the big like 84-page FAQ on Game Facts before, Fanatic fucking ruins that website or whatever. Fandom, rather. Fanatics is a sports sports shop website. I'm sorry. Even if you read that fucking guide, you're not prepared for what's going to happen the first time you lock up because you don't know the timing.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's this like tremendous running up the hill kind of thing where like the first time you win a match, it's like earned.
Oh yeah, and once you understand, right? Like it's not intuitive because you're used to playing a wrestling game where as soon as you grapple, you hit the button again to execute the next move, right? Where you get punished for doing that in KOC. You do that too early, you get punished, right? So that's why I know I was frustrated as hell. I'm like, what the hell, what the hell, what the hell? And then I get it. And I'm like, oh, you got to time it right there. But I'm like, what about all these other grapple moves, grapple things? I'm like, oh my God, there's more than one front grapple. Holy shit, side grapples, back grapples. And like, blew my mind. I was like, wow, this game is already the deepest wrestling game I've ever played. And I haven't even won a match yet. You know?
One thing that a lot of people don't talk about with KOC is that game's movesets are ridiculously deep because most characters have 5 front and 5 back grapples.
Yeah.
And even if they don't have a special in those, like a powerball move in those grapples, that's still 20 front grapple moves and 20 back grapple moves. So you can have like a lot of dudes in King of Colosseum have shit like just an arm wringer or a headlock, and you've got to hit like circle or triangle even to get like the mid strength moves. Triangle typically is like a big move, but like that game does wrestlers like Fujinami so much better than any other game because his moveset isn't like Fire Pro doesn't do him well because his moveset isn't like half big moves. He's a technical wrestler. He'll grind you out. And that game does that style of wrestling like perfectly. It also does like the 90s All Japan. It does anything from like 1980 to 2004 in terms of heavyweight wrestling from Japan perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. I know, and I guess where like the American gamers get frustrated. It's like, how come I can't pull off my stunner in the first 5 seconds? You know,
Right.
You're not going to have a squash match in KOC too easily. You know, all the depth just from the initial grappling is just like that's amazing. I tried to recreate that when we did Uprising. I did the side grapple move, just like the arm wringer position. But again, didn't have enough money to animate a lot of moves, so I think all you could do was like a elbow smash to the back from that position. So why did I bother, right? But yeah, it's amazing, especially when you had to learn how to do the timing to the right dips. It was kind of like Giant Graham 2000, where you could do a Tiger Driver, but if you timed it better, you could do a more devastating, break his neck Tiger Driver. And that's kind of like how KOC had shit going too, right? Although I never played the original Giant Graham, it wouldn't run on my Dreamcast for some reason. So there's, for as big of a wrestling game nerd as I am, there's still a couple of like classic games I haven't even been able to play yet. Giant Graham, the original, is one of them.
You know what? I've played the All Japan featuring Virtua, which is, I guess, the weird, like, it's the first game in the series, I guess, because Giant Graham 2000 is All Japan Pro Wrestling 3. But I've never played Giant Graham All Japan Pro Wrestling 2. I actually don't know that many people that have. You've either played one or the other. Most have played Giant Graham 2000 because I remember when I first got the internet in like late 2000 and like the WWF game boards that I was reading because I was like 9, they were getting flooded with people like buy Giant Graham for the Dreamcast. And when Fire Pro D came out, there would be like just people that would invade boards and just like fucking tidal wave the board with Fire Pro posts. And I remember people talked about how Giant Graham 2000 was like the best wrestling game ever made. And I didn't play it till early 06, but I think in terms of like, because it is an arcade game, in terms of like arcade style wrestling games, that might be like the Dawn Mega. Like that is, it's like weirdly brilliant in ways that a lot of other wrestling games aren't, like the burning combos or whatever.
Yeah, and it was tuned for the arcade too. Like it was the opposite of KOC, not in depth. It was pretty deep. Like it had the different grapple position, right? The different grapple timing. But the pacing, you could get your ass handed to you and lose a match in 2 minutes quite easily. But I mean, it's an arcade game. You're supposed to put your quarters into it, right? So it makes sense.
Yeah, I got my ass kicked by Don Leo Jonathan like 17 times the first time I played that game, and I was like, I don't know who this motherfucker is, but like he's clearly he's got to be the baddest motherfucker. And then like I turned the game off, turned it back on, got to the first legend. This time it's the Destroyer, and I never said anything bad about the Destroyer because like it felt like a name that I knew, and then like I started watching like the All Japan Classic stuff and reading about like early Japanese wrestling history, and I'm like, okay, yeah, it makes perfect sense the Destroyer is able to fuck me up like this. He fucked everybody up.
Sleeper hold, right? Back when the sleeper hold was a dangerous move in a wrestling game. My go-to in that game was Bruiser Brody. Man, I love his entrance and everything. For a Dreamcast game, that was pretty sick. But it's funny that whole era of games, like I say, when I went and first did my shady deal for some bootleg games, I was going through the binder at the night market, and I'd never heard of some of these yet because I thought I was a wrestling gamer just because I knew what No Mercy was and I loved it. I didn't know the Japanese scene, right? So when I go there and I'm like, "You got any wrestling games, man?" He's like, "Yeah, look." So I'm looking through this and I'm like, Giant Graham, Tukon Retsuden. What the fuck is this? And I've heard of Fire Pro, so Fire Pro D. Okay, yeah, get me that one. And All Star Pro Wrestling 3 and all this shit. And man, I remember coming home with a little stack of burnt CDs and going through all these games in one day that I'd never heard of or seen before. So you can imagine, man, it was like probably like taking fucking heroin for the first time. Like playing through like in one day. Here's Fire Pro, here's Giant Graham, here's like two Conrad student and all this shit. And I was that guy downloading the translations and everything from the internet, with my binder of translations for all the menus so I could figure out how to play the games, man. It was crazy. Good time to be a wrestling gamer, man.
I still have my binder from like 6th grade that I repurposed in 7th grade to have all of my translation guides for these games. Like, I printed off the KOC2 translation guide like a year before I actually got the game. Because I was like, I'm gonna fucking play this game eventually. I just gotta figure out how to mod my PS2. And to this day, that binder still got all of, I think it's got like KOC2, Wrestle Kingdom 2, All-Star Pro 3, a bunch of the character specific guides for Fire Pro Z. Just because I thought
Yeah.
the bios they wrote for people, like it's '03 and they're talking about how washed Bob Sapp is already. And it's like, yeah, I can see it.
Good time, man. I don't know if I could have even got into wrestling games if it wasn't for game facts and their translations and everything else, man.
Yeah, GameFAQs in a weird way, their Fire Pro board let me down the primrose path to like watching Japanese wrestling. So to everybody who was posting in the Fire Pro D and Fire Pro GBA boards, thanks.
You're welcome.
And who was the guy? Was it Bill Wood who put out the
Yeah,
really nice full color? I printed that off and had it
Yeah.
bound at Staples. I loved it so much. His Fire Pro
yeah, it
Strat
was.
guide.
It looked like a fucking official strat guide. I was
Yeah,
so
totally.
impressed when I saw that for the first time.
All right, I've got it bound here, like proper cover and full color and everything. It's pretty much. I keep it in my closet though, or I'll never get laid if any woman sees that in my collection. So
I miss the Japanese wrestling video game scene of like the early to mid 2000s because we were getting, we all absolutely took this for granted at the time. We were getting classic games at like an astonishing clip.
yeah,
And
and then you would find out, hey, if you like No Mercy, you got to try Virtual Pro Wrestling 2. It's going to blow your fucking mind, right? Or even later on, people who like Day of Reckoning. God, what was the Day of Reckoning in Japan that I really
Wrestle
liked?
Kingdom.
Wrestle Kingdom 2 is one of the most underrated good efforts I think that Ukes has ever done for a wrestling game, man.
I loved that Legends roster. Like the
Right?
cover feels like a weird homage to kind of like how VPW2 had like the artwork of everybody. Wrestle Kingdom 2 has like those really neat little character drawings. And as an aside, I remember somebody on the Fire Pro Club board said they knew the guy that did the cover, and he basically leaked all of the legends that were on the cover, and nobody fucking believed him. And then the cover came out like a week later.
Oh, that's hilarious, man.
They were like, "Oh, there's no way Tiger Mask 1's going to be in this game, even though Sayama's literally in the first Wrestle Kingdom game." I love that Legends roster. For all of his faults as a human being, I'm a huge Dick Murdoch fan, so to have him in the game is great. I think that's the only wrestling game that has that like young version of Abdullah the Butcher in it. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm pretty sure those Acclaim games had like super fat, like older, like
Yeah.
late 80s, early 90s Abby. And you got fucking Tiger Jeet Singh and young Inoki, not even old man Inoki like the first game. That one's a bonus. Fucking young Inoki's the final boss of the little story mode thing they've got, and he's a real son of a bitch, I'll tell you that.
It's the
I loved that game.
only licensed appearance of Hayabusa.
That's true, yeah. And
That game when they had their like school gymnasium venue, right? Because I like playing the quirkier venues, right? So I'm like, wow, this venue's amazing, amazing. And then I see they have a rack of like barbells or something in the corner. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you could actually walk over and grab one of these? I'm like, oh my fucking God, you can. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. And then I realized that, man, this game has more interactive levels than almost any other wrestling game I've played. This is so cool.
I loved Wrestle Kingdom 1 and 2. I know my co-host is not a very big fan of them, and I understand his reasonings, but I'll never forget seeing the initial trailer from like Tokyo Game Show in being like completely gobsmacked that like there's a Japanese wrestling game being made for the 360. Oh, it's being made by Yuke's. Holy shit, there's Keiji Muto and Chono, and this game looks amazing. And I got the 360 with the hard drive, an American one, like a month after they came out. I was just lucky enough to be at Walmart. I found a dude in Indianapolis, like 2 hours away, who traded me his Japanese 360, basically 1-to-1. So, like, February 06, the first weekend of February, I was just sitting in my room playing Wrestle Kingdom, and that was such a fun time. I know people don't like the PS2 version because it looks like shit, if I'm being honest. Like, the graphics downgrade is insane. But the 360 one, I've never played it on an HD TV. I would certainly love to. But the 360 one, I had one of my favorite matches ever. Me and my friend were playing a four-way. It was a junior four-way. I was Kenta, he was Liger, and we were wrestling Kanimoto, and I want to say Minoru Tanaka, and it went 30 minutes straight through.
Jesus. Whatever happened to those, man? I don't understand why. I mean, I guess I'm answering my own question, but you would think that they would still be making wrestling games in Japan. You know, do you think there'd still be enough of a business for it? And yet, here we are high and dry, again, leaving all those poor indie sad guys to do it. It's weird.
I think it's a combination. Like, people don't remember this. Wrestle Kingdom 2 sold really badly, and actually so did King of Colosseum 2. Because that was always cited as, like, KOC 2 sold, like, somebody on Fire Pro Club posted the interview, and it was like sub 100,000 copies. And then years later, like 2014 or 15, an interview with one of the devs came out, and he's like, we were paying the equivalent of $50,000 for some of these wrestlers.
Yeah.
And think about how big that roster is. And it's like, oh yeah, you're not making the money back on 100,000 copies of this game. There's so much weird shit that happens in Japan in the mid 2000s. The wrestling scene crashes. Japanese development kind of crashes for a little bit, because like early PS3 era, it was abundantly clear they were no longer like the predominant makers of like the big blockbuster games. Like, we'd figured it out, unfortunately. And I really wish, like, there was the rumored Spike wrestling game for the DS in 05. There was fucking Fire Pro HD hoax. There were There was Spike Chunsoft actually confirmed at one point during Fire Pro World's development that New Japan had approached them years earlier to make a game, or they'd approached New Japan years earlier to make a game, and New Japan had turned them down, which is why would you do this?
Probably money, man. I mean, I can only think it's they didn't offer enough for the license, because I know, like I say, I'm friends with pretty much, or at least good acquaintance with all the other indie wrestling developers. And I know more than a few of them have tried to put together an indie roster of legit indie wrestlers, right? But it's almost impossible, because they'll find, like, a couple of really cool guys will do it for, like, next to nothing, because they just want to support you. But they were like, then there'll be one or two guys that think that their license as an indie wrestler is like $30,000 US, and which is not a lot of money. But if you pay one guy $30,000 US, how do you justify not paying everyone else something equally? Well, then it becomes completely not feasible. You're not going to make your money back, or in this case, the guy that wanted $30,000 a week later, he got Me Too'd and he's worthless, right? So, scary working with real wrestlers, man.
Virtual Basement. That tech demo they did of the guy running around the ring looked great. I just wish these little demos they were doing featured bigger stars. I get that, like, Sandman shows up at the end, but, like, why couldn't we just have, like, they did motion capture with Little Guido, and Tajiri's in the game. You could probably, if you have a good enough animator, do some, like, quick and dirty of, like, the chain wrestling that they did. Like, why not do that for like a tech demo?
I would say probably because of the cost of the animator to get somebody to animate that, like any kind of
Mm,
chain wrestling sequence. I mean, like the hardest, longest thing to animate for a wrestling game are submission moves because you gotta
right.
animate the locking in the submission move, right? You gotta animate the loop, then the tap out, and that's a defender and attacker animation for each of those segments. So generally, even for something like a simple figure four, you're gonna have 8 separate animations that you have to animate and sync up and link up together, right? Which is why in many wrestling games, ours included, sometimes you'll see the characters not line up perfectly during submissions because it's a little bit tricky when you're dealing with ring collision and rope push and all that stuff. But I'm going to say, yeah, you want to animate a quick chain wrestling sequence. You're probably looking at an animator a week or two to do that at whatever they get paid these days at a big studio. It might not just be worth it to them. You know, kind of,
That's fair.
yeah, it comes down to that, man. So but yeah, I know what you mean. I wish every wrestling game developer all the freaking luck in the world. Um, I love it when new people announce they're making a game and we talk to them, and I can spend hours on Skype telling them all of my mistakes so they don't repeat them and they can make new ones all for themselves.
But have you seen the Ultra Pro Wrestling game?
I've seen some shots of it. Yeah, I mean, it looks tight. Like from what I've seen, if I'm thinking of the right game, I watched some sequences of sliding in and out of the ring and everything, and that's not simple to do well. And it looks like they got that going on. So that's one of the aspects of making a wrestling game that people kind of take for granted is all the platforming you have to code, right? Like
Right.
you've only got a ring, sure. It doesn't seem like you got a lot, but I mean, to get in and out of the ring, staying at the right levels, and you're climbing ropes, and you're gonna have real time physics targeting of top rope moves, and you got to have your hands lining up on the ropes, and you got to have the ropes bending when you jump up and down. And if you're going to do that with physics or animations, that complicates shit too. So that's one of the less sexy parts of the wrestling game is getting all the movement and the platforming down. So yeah, when someone shows a video of a guy just running around the ring in and out, some gamers might think that's nothing, but from a development point of view, that's something.
Yeah, and I loved the way the animations looked in the video Virtual Basement showed. My big gripe with it was like I don't care about Tony Cini. You have a bunch of other wrestlers modeled already. Show me Rob Van Dam running around the ring.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Right? And
yeah.
that's where you get into that. You get into that kind of a trap when you start working with real life wrestler licenses because nobody agrees on who's worth what and who's worth more, right? Like I can't imagine that negotiating with AEW was terribly easy, because you got such a variety of wrestlers with different values they bring to the table, right? Like, ugh, I wouldn't want that job. And that was ironically, that's what Sanders Keel, coming full circle, that was a large part of his job was running interference between the developer, the publisher, and the license holder, right? God, I couldn't imagine how stressful that would have been.
Have you seen from Ultra Pro some of the screenshots they've posted of like their created arenas using the ECW logos and stuff? Because I wanted to get your perspective on this because you've been around for a long time and you've done a lot of marketing for PWX in its various incarnations. Um, do you think there's value in potentially riling the WWE's legal forces by showing like here's ECW Hardcore Heaven 99, or do you think it would have been better just to have shown like a generic version of the arena, um, which would still be clearly identifiable, but it wouldn't have anything that would potentially get you into legal trouble? Or is it a case of like you can make the argument you're just showcasing what the game could do?
It's a double-edged sword, and the thing is, WWE is going to let him get away with it, right? There's already been 2 cases of WWE coming down on people, 3 actually. They came down on Matt Dickey hard when he went to mobile and his stuff started getting popular on the iOS. Um, and the Retromania guy, he started out doing a WrestleFest tribute. WWE shut him down, like shut him right down hard.
Right.
Right? So I would say you're kind of playing with fire. Obviously, it's like guerrilla marketing. If you show an ECW screenshot, you're going to get more engagement and shares than if you show generic screenshots, right? So He's going to get attention for a while. Then he's going to get a cease and desist letter, and unless he's got rich parents, he's going to obey that cease and desist letter. And but the net effects of it is, it helped him build his community. They're not going to go away if he's got to strip all the branded stuff. So one could argue that it might be smart to do what he did. It just depends on how hard the lawyers come down on him, when they do, and they will.
I actually had forgotten about that Mike at Retrosoft. He actually started trying to do a WrestleFest fan game for the computer, and did am I conflating this, or did he also get like a letter saying you can't say your game is the sequel to WrestleFest because we own the word WrestleFest?
I believe that was an issue, and being the smart guy he is, he got the license from the original fucking developer, so he was able to call it the successor to WrestleFest. So he did the smart thing, man. Actually, you know what? That actually points out a really good point. When you talk about which indie developers have been, at least successful in shipping something, you know what I mean, and getting shit done, they've all been either 100% solo developers like Matt Dickey, who isn't responsible for any other employees or contractors. He doesn't have to deal with anyone like that, right? So he's in total control, so he wins, right? And the other ones that have shipped consistently, you've got Dave Horn, Action Arcade, and you've got Mike over at Retro, and those guys are both small business owners to begin with, um, who have experience in accounting and financing and running a team and a crew. So I think it's really neat to point out that the projects that do actually get done so far have by and large been handled by people who have run businesses and shipped products before, and the ones that haven't might be people that just kind of bite off more they can chew. Pointing at myself here a lot of times, right? So interesting.
Have you played WWE 2K22?
I play everything when it comes out, and not to be obviously I'm in a weird position because I love to play wrestling games, but I'm also developing one that I would like to succeed. So I'm whenever I play a new wrestling game, part of me is like, I hope I have fun. The other part of me is like, I hope this fucking sucks really really bad, you know. And with the 2K games, I'm just not interested really. I play them, I have a match, and like, okay, that's cool. But you know what? I think a lot of my disinterest is that I'm just not really that interested in WWE, period. So I can't remember the last time I watched Raw. I really can't. So I'm just really not so much into the games. When I boot up a wrestling game, I'm still fucking half the time I'll grab my Game Boy and play some Fire Pro.
That's actually a really good point. I don't watch current WWE very often at all. I'll occasionally throw, like yesterday my cousin was like, "Hey, let me know how Lashley versus Lesnar goes." So I took one for the team and watched it as it was happening. But I feel no attachment to like 90% of the roster. And even though they have these great Legends rosters now, maybe not so much in 2K22, but in previous games they certainly did. The gameplay still very much tries to emulate what you see on Monday Night Raw, which again, I'm not interested in watching the TV. So to be kind of like the way that I would describe like Aki games and the Fire Pro games, even King of Colosseum, is you're kind of just given a sandbox. Like, here's all the stuff you can do. Go have fun. This is the equivalent of like being put in a playpen and being told like this is as far as you can go.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll give you whatever toys you want.
That's why I think it doesn't appeal to me. Obviously, I'm on the outside there because WWE has more fans than I do, so they know who they're selling to, right? But
Right.
yeah, I think a lot of the attraction with the indie projects is that no one is necessarily trying to simulate or emulate any one brand of wrestling in particular. I mean, we all have our styles, but no one's trying to be a 3D simulator of any one wrestling company or experience. I think that's going to open it up a lot, man. I would love to see more original content from the indie wrestling devs. I don't think we have to play the game of simulating the WWE anymore, or trying to put in our fake versions of WWE wrestlers. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need Underfaker or Bone Cold, to be any
Raging Andy
wrestler.
Organ.
Yeah, you don't need it, right? I know 5 Star was really they were on their game with trying to spoof wrestling or something really funny. But
I
Those
really want to
theme songs are
re-download Five
amazing.
Star now.
The theme songs they did
Five.
for that game are fantastic.
Oh man, I tell you that guy, he's another one who took a lot of heat, man. You know, he built a wrestling game company, and then he tried to build a wrestling promotion. And at the time, he was signing guys like Mysterio and Morrison. You know, like, phew, yeah, took a lot of heat when that didn't go well. So I feel for him. I know he made some mistakes, and he's owned up to. And
Do you think there's ever a chance he tries to make another game?
I don't know because honestly, I think his experience was pretty sour from the first one. There were some licensing issues that we talked about that just suck all the fun out of it. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So I can't imagine. I know that I know one developer, and I won't throw him under the bus, but I know even he was like, I'm done. I'm fucking done. I'm never dealing with this shit again. You know? And he was relatively successful, but just dealing with the whole licensing thing and working with license holders, and he was just like, "This is not why I started this." You know?
right.
Brutal.
I
Yeah.
I remember seeing some of the Rey Mysterio like concept art and being kind of disappointed that like they dropped the PS4 version of the game. And I had a DM argument with the Five Star Wrestling page on Facebook at one point because they were claiming there's going to be more moves in this game than any other wrestling game, which was obvious bullshit. There
Yeah,
wasn't.
but it's an easy thing to say. I said the same thing too. When I was like, "What's Pro Wrestling X going to be?" I'm like, "Well, it'll be like, it'll have all the moves from Revenge and No Mercy and Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, because how hard can that be? It's an old game. Must be easy to animate that many moves, right?" I don't think we're still anywhere near 5%. Yeah. So talking out of your ass is probably a common wrestling game developer problem.
He actually made burner accounts that messaged me too
Oh,
about
that's
like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I played King of Colosseum 2 and this game has more moves, and it's like the game's not out yet. How do you know that? Oh, right, because you have like 3 friends on Facebook, and this totally isn't a transparent like I'm mad that you're going on to like because I commented on like a Smack Talks video and was like, yeah, this none of this adds up. There's no way the game's gonna have like all of this. And it was like 3 different accounts saying the exact same shit to me in my replies and my DMs.
yeah,
And it
that's a
kind of
little cringe.
soured me on it.
Well, it would.
Yeah,
It's cringe, but you know what? I have to full confession here, man. I think I was about 2 seconds away from creating a sock puppet account on the Fire Pro Club one time because I just wanted to come in there and defend myself, but not myself. So I almost took the bait too, man. It's really hard to just breathe, and especially when you have legitimately fucked up, take the heat for it. You got to take the heat for it, man. You know?
yeah, and that's what I've always respected you for. I've made the fucking PWS jokes like everybody else, but like I think
So
I
have
even
I.
said it to my co-host at one point. Like I'm like Dave's like more than willing to eat as much shit as necessary because he knows the fucking original like the steelbook version of the game still hasn't come out. And by the way, what was the last contact you had with Road Warrior
I
Ace?
knew you
Because
were
I
gonna
believe
go
I
there.
messed.
Road Warrior Ace. It's been a few years, man. I know. I keep having like fantasies about one day being able to just give everybody everything that even they ever asked for from me. I just want to be able to do that, man. Everybody gets their steel case. Everybody gets all their, Dr. Death animations in the game. It gets everything they want, man. You know. But you know what? It's so fucking cool. We joke about like some you might want to call them overzealous supporters or whatever, but they keep it fun. They make it fun, man. It's nice to know someone gives a shit enough about you to ask you to do something, even reach out and even ask. And honestly, it's good that they hold you to account when you fucking let them down. You know, because it's not going to kill
I
you to make a mistake and take the heat for it. You know, it will fucking kill you to make a mistake and then lie about it, try to get around it, blame somebody else for it, you make excuses for it. That shit adds up, you know? Or at least at the end of the day, I wouldn't say proud of my mistakes is the right way to put it, but I mean, I'm not terribly ashamed of anything, you know? It's a wrestling game. We're not curing cancer. I have a ton of fun doing this. And even if it takes another 20 years and I'm still doing it, and we changed the name to Pro Wrestling X Forever. Okay, Chinese democracy, whatever you want to call it, man. We're having fun doing it, and that's why we're doing it.
Pro Wrestling X Forever. That
Is
was a fan site, wasn't it, back in the day?
It might have been. I know there was jokes
yeah.
because, there was jokes about how Guns N' Roses next album will come out before Pro Wrestling X, and it did, and how Duke Nukem Forever will get finished, and it did. And then but we talk about it now because games have changed a little bit in how they're delivered, and we're like, even Pro Wrestling X, when it comes out of early access and it's full release, we're still going to keep building it out and updating it. We're not going to stop and work on Pro Wrestling X 2. We're going to keep building on this. So literally, hopefully, we just keep making Pro Wrestling X bigger and bigger and bigger forever. So we thought it's a joke. We should call it Pro Wrestling X Forever just to poke the bear, but we haven't.
You've had like essentially the same logo as long as I can remember. Has there been any discussions about maybe changing the logo that you guys use? I like the logo. It's just something I've been wondering a lot over the last few years.
And changing the cover image that we've been using a Nintendo 64 box art mock-up forever because it really conveys kind of where we're coming from,
Right.
But the logo is a bone of contention with me a little bit because when you've got a game that's been in development kind of hell like Pro Wrestling X is off and on, you want to put all your resources somewhere where it makes the game better. Like if I've got an hour of my artist's time, let's animate something for an hour, or let's fix a graphic glitch or something, right? Let's not create a new logo. You know what I mean? So we had the original logo, which was like the chrome, nice, shiny, pointy thing. And then about 3 years ago, I just had a retreatment of the logo done to look like just dripping spray paint on concrete. I felt
Right.
it reflected a bit more of the kind of like dirty concrete underground kind of development we've kind of been in and what we're going for. But in terms of changing the logo completely, it could happen one day. It just seems like the lowest priority ever. Kind of like our crowd. If you look at the crowd in Pro Wrestling X, ugliest fucking 3D crowd you've ever seen in a wrestling game. And it's probably going to stay that way, just like Fire Pro stays 2D, because it makes no sense at all for us to invest any kind of resources into making the crowd look pretty when we've got so much important gameplay work to do. You know what I mean? So now it's become a running joke that Pro Wrestling X is destined to have the ugliest crowd for the rest of its life.
I I hate to keep going back to it, but I was gone for a while. Have you guys discussed possibly looking into getting more funding from like other sources? Like maybe, obviously you're doing the Patreon, but like maybe something like a telefilm or maybe even like another crowdfund?
Probably won't do another crowdfund again just because I feel we've went to that well a couple times already and it feels like taking advantage. I would
Okay.
rather keep updating the game on Steam where, we make a few bucks on Steam, and I'd rather make our money that way, by building a better game that more people want to buy. Right? Seems like just the right thing to do. That being said, we do some outside work and whatnot, and we are getting some funding here and there through different places. Can't really say, but we are also, we're going back to see what kind of funds and whatnot are available to us now that the COVID stuff is gone, and a lot of these programs are opening up again that were locked down for a while. We'll try it. We just find it's not so much about getting the money; it's about getting the right money for the right reasons from the right place, right? Um, I'd rather make our own money. That's why we love just selling the game on Steam and making our money that way. Um, when you get into like loans, all of a sudden now 4 hours a day is spent managing the administration of all the loan requirements instead of building your game, right? Even investors, investors are cool and all, but they want their money back times 10. So there's pressure there, right? In an
Right.
ideal world, man, I would just love to make 10 grand a month so I can pay my team to work full time on Pro Wrestling X, and we would be the most efficient and productive wrestling dev team you've probably ever seen because we've gotten so used to doing this in our spare time that when we get chances to do it full time, man, the guys rock.
I hope you guys get there as well. So there was a video you did a few years ago that at the end had clips of real wrestlers from like some promotion in Europe. Someone that I was mutuals with on Twitter at the time actually identified the two wrestlers.
Nice.
What promotion was that, and what happened with those characters popping up in PWX?
What happened to them was Pro Wrestling X happened to them. We got a deal. We did some DLC, some characters with German Championship Wrestling, GCW. And again, we weren't fully funded at the time. So we've got these characters ready. They've got sick custom moves and everything. But we want to get the game out of early access so we can give these characters as DLC in the game, right? We don't want to do that while the game's early access. It's just not right. You know, all of a sudden have DLC for an early access game. No, that's not cool, right? So we've been working with them steadily. Hey Jonas, if you're listening, buddy, we're talking about you. We've got these characters ready. Of course, we had them ready so long ago that each of these characters has probably gone through at least another 2 gimmicks, right? So now they're classic versions of themselves that are going to be in Pro Wrestling X. So it was fun to do. They turned out really great. They got some wicked new move animations and stuff, but they were awesome to work with. They just got stuck with the slow moving tugboat of Pro Wrestling X, and we couldn't get the game to the point where we wanted it to be before we released the characters.
Have you looked into? I believe we talked about this earlier. I'm sorry, I CTE did a lot of dumb things when I was a kid. Have you looked into other maybe smaller promotions as well for like future DLC once the game is out of early access?
Yes, but it has to be done in a way that makes sense financially, right? To put a wrestler, like just to build a wrestler, just their model, just their textures, just their look, right? Especially if you have to do it mostly from scratch. To pay an actual like pro artist like we have, you're looking at going to be like a couple grand worth of work, right? To do it right, to do it good. And then you got to animate, well, you got to at least give them their move set, right? And if they've got a lot of generic moves in their moveset, great. You probably already have them animated. But let's say they have a custom front grapple finisher, top rope fly move finisher, custom taunt, custom submission move. Now you're looking at probably at least another 5 grand worth of animation that you got to do, right? So on the low side, to get a decent, accurate character, even a shallow moveset one, you're looking at about 10 grand worth of labor, right? Steam takes 30% of that. Okay. And then we're in Canada where our dollar doesn't mean much right now. So
No.
you're going to lose another 30% once Steam pays you out, right? Now you got to share that revenue if you made like a back end deal too to share some revenue with the wrestler. So now you're lucky that let's say you sell this wrestler for, let's be generous. Let's say DLC, you're selling this wrestler for $2, right? Good deal, cheap, guys custom moves, custom attire, and everything. You sell them for $2. You're going to lose 30% to Steam. You're going to lose another 30%. You're lucky if I make 99 cents on that one sale, right? How many indie wrestlers do you know that would probably sell at least 10,000 versions of their character so it would even break even? You know what I mean? Wrestling's popular and all that, but 10,000 is a lot of one
Yeah,
wrestler to sell. I mean, you're gonna have some that'll do pretty awesome. If I did Colt Cabana, sure we'd make. But if I did half the roster on EW right now, I wouldn't even. This is no slight against them. I'm just saying it's numbers, right? Half the roster on AEW, I don't think could even break 1,000 downloads. I could be wrong. And then you got to have a base game that's popular enough that there's enough people there to get your DLC for these wrestlers, right? So we would love to do it. We've talked to a few wrestlers, but it's invite only at this point. And we're not going to do it until we're out of early access and we've taken care of our German friends and everybody's happy there. Until then, it doesn't make financial sense to work with real life wrestlers who expect to get paid, and they should get paid because what they do is worth getting paid, right? So it's where you're kind of
right.
stuck. You know? And then the opposite end of the scale, you got Hulk Hogan, which wanted $500,000 just for the meeting, just to meet him and talk about licensing him. 500 grand.
That's insane. It's also Hulk Hogan, so I guess that tracks.
If I had to build Pro Wrestling X again from scratch, it would cost close to $1 million to get where I am right now with the game we got. If I had CM Punk in my game, I don't think I'd make $1 million back. You know, Who's to say? And who's going to take that risk? Frankly, I've risked enough financially over my life. I probably won't be risking too many more millions on real world wrestlers. I don't know. I mean, what would you do? I mean, everybody wants to build a wrestling game. I'm sure if you guys built one, you'd want to have your fantasy roster in it, right? But then at what point does it not make sense anymore?
I mean, I think I think the one positive in your case for licensing CM Punk is he wouldn't have to deal with any other personalities in a locker room.
Fair enough.
That's
Yeah.
true.
So you wouldn't have to worry about the brawl out situation happening.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, on the opposite side too, I do know some of my development friends who have licensed real world wrestlers. They have made some amazing fair deals and got really, really good deals with some of them. So there are still wrestlers out there who understand what everybody's risking and will work with you and be fair. And if you can work with those guys, great. But that's a full-time job. Like if we were to have a real world wrestler of even like a dozen real wrestlers in our game, that's a full-time job managing all that, getting the reference material, going back and forth, getting their approvals and all their stuff. And we just don't have the bandwidth for it. Don't have the resources to manage all of those real world wrestlers. We just get to wake up every day and go, what kind of wrestler should we create today? Go for it.
Mongo, quick question. Maybe you could help with this. You know Power Town Wrestling, the figures?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, because there's Power Town Wrestling, and they've got like all these. They're making these wrestling figures of like Bruiser Brody, Magnum TA, Kerry Von Erich, Dan Hansen. And I could have sworn at one point that I read they had video game licenses for these wrestlers as well.
Yeah, Steve Rosenthal, the brand manager for them, had mentioned they were looking into licensing. They have 200 legends under these deals, and he had mentioned that they were looking to license them for everything, and specifically did mention video games.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, I haven't seen a Legends of Wrestling game. Apparently hasn't been viable since PS2 days, right? So is it viable now? I don't know. Because I mean, even the AEW game, they're paying to get it made. It's not like there's a publisher paying for the AEW license. That's not the way that deal works. Unless I'm wrong, I could be totally wrong. But the way I understand it's structured is that AEW is paying to have their own game made, right? WWE ain't doing that. WWE gets a check from 2K, for the privilege of using their license. I mean, we've looked into working with, like I say, almost every company. We've had talks with them all, and it always breaks down when it comes to how quickly they want a game made and how much they think it's worth making it, right? And we pulled out of a deal just over a year ago that was in negotiations, going really well. Spent like 3 months negotiating it, and we were excited because we get to work with some of our favorite wrestlers. Everything's going to be great. But then it became apparent that it was going to be such a tight deadline and budget that we were like, the only thing worse than not making this game would be getting famous for making a horrible fucking version of this game, right? And we're like looking at what the budget is right now, it's just not feasible. And again, a few months after we pulled out of that, a bunch of their roster got Me Too'd. So it's kind of like, shit, there would have been a bunch of wasted effort right there, and they would have expected us to pick up the slack, right? Like it doesn't make sense, and that hurts, man. It hurts. Like when you start a wrestling game development company, you dream of getting the chance to work with your favorites, and then you're Aki working on No Mercy or working on Revenge, right? And that'd be great to do. It'd be fucking boyhood wrestling fan dream to work with some of my favorite wrestlers and that, but never want to put yourself in a spot where it could backfire on you and you get famous for the wrong reasons, right? So at the end of the day, yeah, we're not rolling in millions of other people's dollars here working on a big budget famous wrestling brand, but we get to have fun working on what we're doing, and nobody tells us what we can't do, which maybe I'm just getting old, but that's worth a lot,
Do you think, I guess to piggyback on the Power Town question, do you think if you were approached by Power Town with the gigantic roster that they have, you'd be interested in incorporating some guys like Brody, Hansen? I think they've said they've got Nick Bockwinkel. Obviously, you're from Canada. He was a big deal in Winnipeg, which I know is not where you're currently located, but it's Nick Bockwinkel, and I'm going to take every opportunity I can to talk about how much I love Nick Bockwinkel.
Well, here's the story for you. I took a leak next to Nick Bockwinkel and saw the tip of his penis. So how's that for
Wow.
a story? I know, right? I living the life.
His little winkle.
No, I was at Cauliflower Alley Club years ago, like obviously years ago, right? And yeah, I was like, wow, what would my dad say if he knew I was taking a leak with Nick Bockwinkel? This is the pinnacle right here, man. It's cool. But no, to your point, um, the discussions with other companies. And I guess that's just why there are no other licensed wrestling games. Lucha Underground couldn't even make that happen, right? Because it breaks down when you realize this is how much money you're gonna have to make back just to break even, and that's where everybody gets scared, right? It seems like the
Yeah,
only way we're going to be able to do this now, like our plan going forward, is let's keep building Pro Wrestling X until we've got the semblance of a solid foundation, and then maybe we could talk about a revenue model where we do expansion packs for other wrestlers and companies, where we're not risking development of the core game. It's just an expansion DLC, just like Fire Pro did and everybody else when they got the Steam, right? That seems to be the way to make the most sense for the wrestlers, the license owners, and the game development company, right? Like we can take a chance on a couple wrestlers as DLC. We can't take a chance on basing an entire 2-year game development around it, you know?
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes that makes sense.
Me too.
God, we've asked a lot of questions. Dave, is there anything else that sort of you would like to say in closing or anything?
Just once again, I want to thank you guys for having me on. I was really looking forward to talking with you guys, just because you don't hold back. You know, you talk a little smack, which is fun. I like that. Being able to get snarky back with you is fun too. And just being able to talk to people about what we've been doing and what's going on, it means a lot to me to reach those people. Well, thank everybody who supported us for the last 100 years. To you, if it's an inspiring story or a cautionary tale, it depends completely how you're coming at it. But the crew and I right now, man, we're loving what we're doing. It's fucking so lucky to be able to work on a wrestling game, whether it's in our spare time or whether we get some funding and we can do it more full time. We are so fortunate to get to make a wrestling game for everyone, not for everyone. So very, very, very happy and lucky to do that. And if anybody's interested, Pro Wrestling X on all the social media and shit. If you have any ideas for funny crowd signs, please let me know. They're hard to come up with, as you can see. And nah, man, it's all good. I guess the only question I have to ask you is, what the hell ever happened to Sonny Bono?
Oh, he's alive.
You know, yeah, he just recently popped up in my mentions on Twitter,
Mine as
and
well.
I don't. He was a mutual of mine until around the time Fire Pro World came out, and I just had the stream of consciousness on Twitter with like, this game is kind of doomed. They didn't move away from the graphics style. They're charging $50. The game's got like no content in it. And he like unfollowed me, and I was like, I kind of get it, but like, how is what I'm saying off base at all? And I love Fire Pro World. It's a great game. But when you look at the amount of content it shipped with versus like even returns, it
Yeah,
felt like a very light package.
fair enough. No, I know that he was also someone who wanted to make his own game, right? And he had the Axe Bomber project, and then he
Soup
did
lobster.
the game Suplex. I thought Soup Lobster was fucking hilarious idea, and Suplex. But yeah, I was just wishing him luck and well, man, because I know he had big ambitions too, and he seemed like he knew what he was talking about. But yeah, just wondering. It's all good, man. It's been a while since I've been on. Obviously, Fire Pro Club was like forever ago, and then Fire Pro was, oh my god, and then yeah, the X Bomber. God, we are nerds, man. Jesus.
I want to thank you for doing this interview today. Hopefully, we'll have you again on the future if it's to talk about PWX or maybe, we're doing episodes on WWE games, WCW games, so maybe something like that. I think next I'm going to try to shit talk Kenny Omega on Twitter as well to see if he'll do an interview with me. So,
We were trying to shit talk. We were thinking of shit talking Omega because we were like, you know what we want to do? Uh, a Ring of Honor expansion would be fun to
ooh,
do. Right? Like I know AEW is tied up with their main license with Use and everything, but like, man, You know, it wouldn't take much for us to be able to put together a good Ring of Honor expansion, put another 3-4 months work into the game itself, and then do some Ring of Honor. That'd be kind of fun, man. But yeah, I don't think they're terribly interested. It's all good. But yeah, thank you guys again, man. Been a blast. Happy to come on anytime. I thought I only had an hour, so let's hope my elderly mother's still breathing upstairs. I should have checked on her a while ago, but hey, if not, we'll have a funny ending to this story too. So thanks again, you guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep. Take care, Dave. All right, so we obviously thank Dave for being on earlier. It's time for the independent wrestling game roundup. As we've been doing this now for 3 hours, I will try to be as brief as possible. So, did you see the Ultra Pro Wrestling menu videos?
Yeah, this is such a little thing, but I like that when you go into the options and you choose, like, let's say you have a 10-man Royale, as they call it, it starts adding wrestlers on the main menu. That, I think, reminded me of GQ Power Pro. I think that had something similar. Like, when you go to a tag match, it would add the wrestlers on the screen as well. So it's such a little thing, but I like that touch. Um, I like that the obviously the different cage options that you can have. Obviously, that's in WWE as well, where you can have, the old blue steel cage, your standard steel cage. I like the video. It was neat.
I did not know they still have the option for multiple cages in the WWE games. That's wild. I thought it looked really good. I like, as you said, even if you change like gimmicks for like the cage or the ladder match, or table match too, it'll put that on the menu as well. I also on their Twitter they mentioned talking to Joe Hendry once and him suggesting they look into Fire Pro, and that's kind of what informs the current like graphic style of the game, the more cartoony take on the models. So that's really cool. I didn't like their little rant they went on about Fight Forever the day the Adam Cole and Kenny Omega gameplay dropped, because that just taking shots at a game that people are very enthusiastic about is not a great way to.
Doesn't help you at all.
Yeah, it does nothing for you. And when you're in the replies arguing with people that like, this isn't a wrestling game, it's a fighting game in a wrestling ring. Well, wrestling games, including the ones that your game is based on, won major fighting game awards. So like, wrestling games are fighting games. There's no way around it. They're not fucking sports games. They're goddamn fighting games.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was a tough start for them, and again, like as we've talked about, using the ECW logos and arenas and stuff. The more they get away from doing that sort of thing, like using licensed materials and go about their own path, and showing what they're capable of, I think that's a lot more interesting to me.
Agreed. I'm optimistic. I want to believe that everybody has a chance of putting something out. Maybe they do. I would like to see more progress on like actual gameplay than focusing on like create a wrestler or create an arena. Because like Dave kind of said it first when we were recording with him, like focus on getting the ring and two skeletons, punch, grapple, bump, get up, like focus on that stuff before you do anything else.
Yeah, exactly. You need to get your core down before you have the rest of the apple. It's my apple
Yeah, we gotta
reference for
ask Sanders
today.
Keel about that
Yeah.
if we ever get him on someday. Hopefully our buddy Dave, who again I'd like to say thank you to for coming on. Hopefully Dave can hook us up with Sanders, because I'd like to personally apologize for everything I've said about Sanders Keel on the internet for the last 20 years.
I don't know what I've said about him. I don't think I've said anything.
I just know that after a while of being told he was the devil, I started to believe it. And thanks to, ironically enough, Dave's podcast with him, I realized he wasn't. That wasn't him at all. Casual Pro Wrestling posted some stuff, which I retweeted on my Twitter. It looks cool.
Yeah, I mean, every time footage of that game comes out, like they haven't disappointed in being like, every time they provide an update, it never disappoints. Like, it's always something new, and yeah, I mean, I think it looks really good.
My one thing in the two clips they showed is I want this game to be faster, but
Yeah.
also they're implementing everything right now. There's plenty of time to speed the gameplay up once they've got it working. So that's such a small it's such a small thing to kind of take aim at, I guess, when everything else has looked super promising so far.
It's almost the opposite of Ultra Pro, right? Because Ultra Pro is like here's the menus and the options that you have, and then Casual Pro it's like here's the gameplay first. So
Yeah, not that there's I guess anything negative, because Dave did give interesting perspective on maybe the benefits of putting the menus and stuff out there first, and also the negatives to it as well. Dave freely admitted he's made a bunch of mistakes that he's warning other indie game developers about now. I want both those games to be good
of
above
course.
all else. I'd like to see a little bit more gameplay progression from Ultra Pro, and also again what we did see from them, I'd like to see it a little faster. I get that like their whole thing is No Mercy, but No Mercy was like slow in part because it was unoptimized, and also in part because they were sacrificing some of the speed for like prettier graphics.
Yeah, exactly.
We're on hardware now where the cartoonish looking game doesn't need to run slowly. Like give me something fast, like Fight Forever, to keep going back to that game.
Yeah, don't give me
And
something as fast as like Ultimate Muscle, but a bit speedy.
God, I tried playing that game on the GameCube without like an HDMI adapter, and the input lag absolutely nuked me.
Yeah,
That game is so quick.
I know. Like when I was a kid and playing it, I was just like, I can't handle this. It's way too fast.
Oh, I would go to like a different place. I would mentally become one with I played as Wally Tuscan. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. I became one with the walrus and I was whipping ass, but like I tried playing that game recently and just my brain doesn't react that quickly anymore.
No, mine doesn't. That's for sure.
Steve Masson. We had this discussion on the first podcast we did that didn't end up uh, getting released because we didn't
Steve
record
M.
it. Yeah, the physics based wrestling game guy. He posted a really cool new clip of like being able to do like rolls into like strikes. So like a rolling thunder drop kick type thing, and also like the ability to charge up your strikes as well. And this looks really everything he's shown looks incredible.
Yeah, I'm watching it right now, and it's just like I feel like this is sort of being undersold, like the footage he's shown, because it looks so good.
I think it's maybe a case of people don't necessarily know the game's coming,
Yeah,
which is also a huge problem. More people need to know this game's coming. It also might be because like he's posting all this on his own Twitter instead of having a dedicated
e-
one for the game.
exactly. I don't even think he has a name for the game, right? So, and also he's doing this in Unity. I don't know if you noticed that.
No, I didn't know that. That's really impressive.
Yeah, he's got like a pinned tweet, and he's got a hashtag made with Unity with the logos in the background. So
I completely glossed over that. I oh, also an update for UPW real quick. There won't be a new game every year. It's one game continuously updated at no extra cost until the end of time. But of course, this comes in a tweet where they dunk on like what happens to your created wrestlers when 2K23 hits. Do they transfer over? Do you have to start from scratch? I've long felt, and this goes back to even the SVR days. There's like zero reason they can't put a feature in where you can transfer your friggin' cause over every year, because they usually don't take. Maybe it's different. I haven't touched 2K22's creator wrestler mode, but prior to 2K22, it didn't feel like they removed a lot of stuff like the generic creator wrestler pieces year over year. So why do people have to like restart their whole shit every year?
yeah, it's a proper pain in the ass. I'm sure there is things moved out of Creator Rust. I don't know what exactly. I don't go through it that much, but it does seem like bullshit. Like you definitely should be able to transfer wrestlers over per year.
Yeah, I especially with something like community creations, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that you can't just like hit a button to transfer. Like you can upload things to Pokemon Bank and then download them in the next game, or at least that was my understanding of it. So like why I can't have my shiny Groudon in the next game would be my reaction if they ever took that functionality away. I also don't have a shiny Groudon anymore. I stopped paying for Pokemon Bank like years ago. So unfortunately, he's gone, I think. I don't know how Pokemon Bank works anymore. I don't remember. But creator wrestler transferring should absolutely be in. I know they're planning to have a community creations aspect. I don't know if that means workshop.
I would think so.
We also, it's not technically. Would Fight Forever be an indie game because they're paying for the development of it? I mean, there's a publisher, so I'm assuming THQ Nordics put some money into this too. But we do know now through THQ Nordic's Japanese website that Fight Forever is in fact coming out next year. So there's no hope of getting that game before Christmas.
No. What else was there from that interview? I feel like there was a few different pieces of information, right?
Oh, I gotta go find Monster Brunch's Twitter now. Shout outs to them. They've done, along with Cade on the Discord server, a tremendous service to the community by translating a lot of the articles from 4Gamer and I believe Famitsu, and also the Japanese THQ Nordic website. They've been doing some stuff recapping Tokyo Game Show recently because, the perfect time to recap Tokyo Game Show is a month and a half later. They interviewed Nick Sobek, who I had not seen a picture of in a couple of years, and belly laughed when I saw the haircut the guy's got now. In terms of interesting information, Nick Sobek confirmed Creator Wrestlers if there was any doubt that was going to be in a wrestling game released in 2023. He did confirm DLC will be available even after the main game is released. They're looking to support the game for years. And this was a month and a half ago, so the Brawl Out stuff was still relatively fresh. They did say they plan to reveal the roster in the near future. There's a very diverse roster. They're sure that there's going to be a wrestler that players like. The roster is diverse such that people are going to be able to find a wrestler that they like. David from THQ Nordic said the playability of the game reminds him of the games he enjoyed when he was younger. It's like a classic car with the latest engine and equipment. Looks good, fun to drive, and it's comfortable. Nick Sobek once again brought up the point of Ukes creating animations by hand.
Right.
We've talked about this a lot off the air. There are animations that look, and I'll be polite about this, eerily similar to legacy animations from older Ukes games.
Pretty much one for one.
Yeah, there's some, you could argue, subtle differences in selling on some of them, but yeah. So I'm wondering if the hand animated stuff was the stuff specifically done for this game, because one, that would save them a hell of a lot of money, and two, it would make a hell of a lot of sense if they're legally able to use that back catalog of animations, that they would use it. Because imagine starting a wrestling game from scratch and you have 20 years worth of shit you can't use to fill out the animations.
What a pain in the ass that would be.
Right. I really want information on that game, even if it's not coming out. Like the PSN database said February. February is 3 months away. Maybe not getting it in that time. But I'd like to see more of the gameplay, because everything we saw, the computer versus computer matches that were uploaded from Tokyo Game Show, and those look great.
Yeah.
This game looks incredible. I'd like to see a little more of it.
If it's not out in February, how close do you think it would be released to WWE 2K23? Because that's probably going to be released around WrestleMania, right?
So the brain trust in the AEW Games Discord server, who I'm going to shout out and then I'm going to shit on them. There was this big argument about the game dropping at the same time as 2K23, which in my lifetime, I can think of one time a game dropped opposite the WWE game, and that was Fire Pro Returns the day SVR08 came out.
Mm-hmm.
And in complete fairness, all things being equal, Age Tech could not get that game into every major store. I think it got to GameStop, Toys R Us, and Best Buy. in Kmart, and it still sold reasonably well relative to the size of Age Tech, but there's so many instances. Go look at the late 90s and early 2000s. Fucking ECW Hardcore Revolution comes out 3 weeks before SmackDown. And Hardcore Revolution sold well enough that Acclaim decided to fucking crank out a sequel, 8 months later? 6 months later?
Yeah, I think it was.
There's like a long history when there's multiple wrestling promotions of games launching relatively close to one another. It's not a big deal, because I was talking to people about this in that server. You have the audience that's going to buy both games because they want both games. Dave kind of alluded to this both on and off air, that some wrestling gamers are just going to play everything because they love wrestling games. You have the audience that's going to buy it specifically because it's the AEW game, which, how big that audience is, who the fuck knows. They did ship 1.4 million copies of TNA Impact at a time that I don't think they had that many people watching the show. So, if that's the example, the sky's the fucking limit. And then there's the third audience that love WWE 2K, and they're the people that are going to shit on the AEW game on Twitter constantly, and they're never going to touch this game, so who gives a fuck what they think or want?
Not me.
Me either. I do find them incredibly fun to dunk on, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you can't avoid it. They put it out them.
Oh,
themselves, so.
Another interesting note about Fight Forever, I think, before we wrap this up, Nick Sobek confirmed in the THQ Nordic blog post, Iwashita, Gedasan, his deal is not with Yuke's, it's with AEW specifically.
That's very interesting. I mean, one of the things that, was being reported on is like the disagreements between AEW games and Yuke's. So that makes me wonder who specifically.
I could talk for a while on this one. I will say Brian Williams has never done anything to me personally. In every interview I've ever heard, he comes off like a super likable, personable guy. There cannot be an accident about he tweets that he's entering the next stage in his career, and then a few weeks later, Mike Straw tweets that he's heard that the Fight Forever gameplay has gotten like dramatically better in the last several weeks. And I've talked with other people about this in DMs. I think maybe it was a conflict because Williams would have been pushing for more of like a Here Comes the Pain style influence on the gameplay.
Right.
When it was obvious from the start, Kenny specifically, and obviously Gadesan, are going to want something reminiscent of No Mercy and Virtual Pro Wrestling.
And that's super interesting considering who helped put the deal together. That was Brian Williams.
Yeah, and also I have no insight on that, and if Brian has nothing to do with that,
Just
I'm sorry,
speculation.
Brian. Like I said, you've always come off like a really cool guy in interviews. But also, Mike Straw reported the thing about Brian Williams returning to the 2K series, and there's been nothing from Brian Williams indicating he's gone back to 2K.
No, I haven't heard him say anything like that.
Like, his bio just says like developer of pro wrestling games, which I noticed, and I asked a couple of people who would know because they're friends with him, like, what does that mean? And then like he himself tweeted about the next stage in his career, and that guy's an asset regardless of what may or may not have happened with the AEW game. And again, this is all speculation. It might have just been that Brian thought it was time to move on, and they backed up a Brinks truck to his house in California, and he decided, fuck it, I'll go back and make the WWE games. But he's an asset because he's been around for a long time, and he knows what specifically the WWE games community wants. So if 2K did get him, that's like, they had 2K22, which restored some people's faith in them. Getting Brian Williams back, even on a perception level, is a very, very big thing for that series going forward because so many people do like him. And he's also, not that his movesets are like perfect because you still have Steve Austin doing German suplexes and power bombs, but his movesets were so much more accurate than the ones we got for 2K22.
Yeah, they were all over the place, weren't they?
Undertaker with a super kick to the back of the head. I'll never forget it. My friend and I were playing that game the day it came out, and he saw that and was like, "Holy shit!" And I'm like, "Yeah, they they really shit the bed on this one, didn't they?"
Actually, when we were talking with Dave earlier, where he was talking about not being interested in the 2K games, and the thing I was thinking of as you guys were talking about it was like those games really need wrestler specific AI because I brought it up before, but like the way everyone goes to the top rope, no matter who they are, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan, Rey Mysterio, within 2 minutes into the match, is super goddamn ridiculous. And if you're presenting your game as simulation or simulation arcade style, whatever, um, they need their wrestlers now to act like who they're portraying, and they don't at all. And I think that for me is one of the main aspects of the game that I'm sort of sick with when it comes to 2K.
Yeah, they've hinted at putting like wrestler specific AI and like logic into the games for years. I would take having the old SmackDown logic where it's like you can pick like brawler, grappler, high flyer, or
Yeah,
like a specific wrestler's AI. I would take that over what we've got in the modern games, which it just feels like every character is hard programmed to get max momentum, signature, finisher, 1, 2, 3.
that's
Fighting
what.
Steve Austin in those games doesn't feel like you're fighting Steve Austin. It did in the old SmackDown games.
Well, what also helped with the old SmackDown games is that you had so many moves that were specifically for that individual. Like you could create Kejimoto in Here Comes the Pain because Ukes had put in like straight up Kejimoto animations, like they moved like him and everything. As opposed to now when you've got there's not enough like
Shining Wizards that don't look like the Shining Wizard that he does.
yeah, it's not his at all. So
Well, also in those games, like Here Comes the Pain, they had like all of those like you had like all of the moveset templates that even extended to fucking Pride. Because
yeah,
there's like two movesets in Here Comes the Pain, one of which has like a heavy Sakuraba influence, the other feels like heavily Vanderlei Silva influenced. And then there's just all of the Japanese movesets like Tenzan, Chono, I think Hashimoto's in there. And even that carries over into Day of Reckoning as well, because fucking Naoya Ogawa's moveset's in Day of Reckoning.
and we've talked about this before too, but like not just the moves themselves too, but like the stances. Like Hurricane had a specific stance for him, which in 2K22 he's got the same as everyone else. You look at Hogan and Shut Your Mouth. He's got the specific way that he stands, and his moves look great. And that's something that they've got away from, and it's as your games are more advanced now than they ever have been. Why you would remove that sort of thing, I have no idea.
Yeah, there used to be a lot more personality and
Yeah,
individuality
that's what
in
it
the
comes down
movesets,
to. Yeah.
which is a big thing they're apparently going with in Fight Forever. Like Kenny used to say it, and I swear to God, every interview, Phoenix was his like barometer for it. Like
And that's who I
when you
want to
pick up a
see.
controller and play as Ray Phoenix, it's going to feel like you're playing as Ray Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I hope he's right.
Well,
I really hope he's right.
when you consider, I mean, that's why I want to see Phoenix so bad, is because consider his moveset and what he does off the ropes. Like that would probably be the most impressive, wrestler in the game. So I'm dying to see Phoenix videos.
I'm dying to see Owen Hart too, because
Oh
have you seen
yeah,
the figure of him?
yeah.
Not real impressed. I'm gonna be
No,
honest.
not really.
The smiling head sculpt doesn't look like Owen, and like the straight face head sculpt with the headband looks like Memphis Jeff Jarrett. Which one of my friends pointed out. If you look at those guys, there's a lot of facial similarities anyway, and I never like put two and two together on that. Like Owen's jawline's obviously more distinct, but like yeah, they kind of look alike, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit.
And I already know we're not getting like true King of Hearts Owen
Which is a shame.
in Fight Forever. Yeah, yeah, they don't want to rattle the cage and have WWE claiming they own intellectual property of something that they didn't. I've always been told, and somebody listening to this who understands legal stuff can correct me, I'm sure, if they didn't commission the gear and they don't like actively own the trademarks to the logos on the gear, they can't claim it's their intellectual property.
I mean, that would have been how they've got around it in the Showdown, right? Because they had Owen Hart's WWF gear. I mean, they had all of his pretty much.
Yeah,
What did they have? They had like King of
they had the
Hearts.
Slammy Awards,
They had like didn't have like the caution one. Or
and
did
they
they?
had the final gear, the silver and red. Yeah, no,
Right.
it was Slammy Awards, Blackheart, Nation, and then tag team with Jarrett.
That's right. Yeah. So they found
And
a way
like you
anyway.
look at, well, I mean, the thing is on Owen, instead of like the trim of his gear saying King of Hearts on the Slammy attire, it just said Owen Hart.
Right. Yeah.
So like, why are the toy company like? Why are you so scared to get like, oh, you're infringing on our intellectual property? Why? Because you own footage of it? That gear design was Owen's intellectual property.
I don't know,
It's
man.
just one of those. Yeah, me either. But I can't wait to see what he plays like in that game. I'm hoping you don't have to go through a really long, convoluted path in story mode to unlock him. I hope it's kind of just a straight line to the end, like unlocking Andre and No Mercy.
You might have to unlock,
Maybe it won't be.
maybe beat the tournament, like the King of Hearts tournament.
Mm. I figure it's going to be something in the story mode,
It would be
just because it kind of feels like what you would do.
it'd be cool if they had like a VPW2 unlocking system. That was always cool when he would lock on wrestlers and that. Because if you didn't read guides, you wouldn't know it would just pop up.
It would be cool if you win the title and then Owen comes out to like challenge you, like kind of
That
how
would be
Andre
nice.
did.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
It would. I mean, I can't think of any other instance like where it would make sense for him to come out and challenge you.
Yeah, those things they can be sort of in bad taste when they do stuff like that. So, but I like that
Like
idea.
Mania 21, which we're
Yeah,
going to talk about probably, I don't know, next time or whatever,
I think so. Yeah.
where Eric Bischoff says he had to go to hell and back to get your opponent, and then here comes Andre.
Yep.
It would be funnier if he said that for Jimmy Snuka, but Jimmy Snuka wasn't dead yet.
That's yeah, Jimmy Snuka. Yep. I don't have anything to say about that.
No, me either necessarily, but I did like playing as him in SmackDown. Here Comes the Pain. I'll say that at the risk of getting people mad at me.
Yeah, he was fun to play as in games, a few games he was in, but then you learn
Yeah, but
some
he also
stuff a few years later, and it's like,
yeah, it's a real shame he did it.
yep.
I'm sure somebody will correct me that Jimmy Snuka didn't do it. It was actually Kevin Sullivan,
That's what I
and
was
boy,
just
I'd
gonna
like to
say.
believe that. I'd really like to believe that, but I'm not entirely sure that I do.
The Tonga kid saw Kevin Sullivan go into the hotel room. He saw it all.
One of my friends made a really hilarious shit post about the Benoit Gate stuff back in like '07 that you would get people mobbing you on Twitter for it now, but it was something to the effect of why was the terrorist organization known as the Dungeon of Doom not questioned about their whereabouts that weekend in June?
You imagine
And
if they questioned Zodiac?
did you do
Yes.
it? Yes.
No.
No.
Yes. No.
They made an action figure of that gimmick, and I really need to get it
I wanted to, yeah.
when I'm in a position where I actually have money. Because I don't currently.
Either do I.
But I'm still waiting. Speaking of action figures, FedEx is allegedly bringing my giant ringside collectibles order I made the day that I decided I no longer wanted to work at what was at the time my current job.
They said it's coming today, right?
Yeah, it's been on a vehicle for delivery since 7:03 a.m. and it's set to be delivered at any point between like 11:30 and 4:15 or 11:15 and 4:30. Usually FedEx gets here around like 1:30, 2 o'clock. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
you
we're
still
we're
got
kind of
time.
right smack dab.
A lot of
Yeah,
time, anyway.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, 11:30 and 4:05. So we're actually they've in fact got less time than I initially thought.
Uh-oh.
Oh, speaking of, because we did wrap up the first episode with some action figure discussion. Did you see all of the Cella related drama that has happened lately?
Well, I suppose it depends on what we're talking about. Because I know like
So
the
apparently,
Wrestling Trader took over and all that.
yeah, so apparently the guy who's doing the bone crunching action style figures made a very interesting post about how the person holding everything up was now out of the picture. And I found out through a couple of people, not just one, that he was actually referring to Charles from Cella. And apparently that one person was the cause of the holdup on everything.
Well,
So
what was it like? Why? What happened?
I don't know. Nobody I was talking to was able to get more specific than that. I do know that the guy from Figure Collections wants to at some point basically explain what happened. So hopefully he does. Hopefully he gets to. Hopefully this also means that all of the things that are in the process with Cella, hopefully this means they all get made. It would be a great tragedy if Eddie Edwards did not get an action figure because he's been in Impact for so long.
Oh yeah, that's right. They did
And
announce an Impact license. I forgot about that one.
it would also be a shame if Deanna Purrazzo never got an action figure. The other two people in that set I couldn't give two shits about, but like Deanna and Eddie would be figures that I would actually spend the money on if we ended up getting them. And also speaking of like random small promotions getting figures, when are we going to get news on the fucking MLW figures?
I have no idea. That's another one I just remembered because you just brought it up. So
I remember seeing the concept art and being like, "Oh, those are going to be cool." And I like the boss fight lucha figures well enough, but we haven't gotten an update on the MLW line since that initial trailer back whenever the hell that was.
yeah, it was months ago now.
The end of June, actually, right before Forbidden Door. So it would be nice if we knew when those were coming, and specifically if a Davey Richards figure was on the way.
I just want, in regards to Cella, I want them to continue because I want my Demolition, I want my Killer Bees, I want my Valentine and Haku that I've already ordered. Maybe I'd pick up that Andre.
You want your killer bees that are the same exact figure,
Hell yeah!
just with
I don't
different.
care. It's different heads. Whatever, I'll take it. They're probably
It's
not going to
it's the
be.
same head sculpt. It's just one has longer
Oh,
hair.
that's right. But you know what? They're probably not going to be that expensive, so I'll take it.
Hopefully not.
Um, I might pick up that what is it, Grapplers and Gimmicks Godfather. We'll see how that turns out.
I'm taking a wait and see approach on that line. We've talked about this a bunch, but it feels like there's too many lines trying to chase the same thing, and everybody has a different opinion on what a Hasbro style figure actually is. And the Godfather prototype, like the unpainted prototype that he showed off, looks great.
Yeah.
It looks fantastic. I just starting a new job soon. Money's going to be a little iffy for a little bit. So I've run out of space. If I'm being honest, I just referenced making a big ringside order. I have zero idea where like any of that shit's going to go. I just knew when I woke up on Thursday morning, like I want to do one thing to make myself happy today, and this is it.
Yeah, I was putting in an order and then the shipping was like $30 and I was like, screw this, I'm not gonna pay that much. I did order the fan takeover Goldberg though, and that should be appearing on Tuesday, which is my birthday, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Well, happy birthday,
Thank
obviously.
you.
I like that Goldberg, but I also think they should have done like a new upper torso for him because Goldberg should not have the same torso as like Triple H from 06.
No.
And Triple H from 06 should not have the same torso as Batista or John Cena from 06 or like Ultimate Warrior.
Are they
That is a man who was not at peak performance in 2006, and there's reasons for that. And,
are
you
they
know,
doing a new Rock Elite? I could have sworn I saw pictures of that.
um, I know there's the Mania 8, or do you mean like the Target exclusive Ultimate?
Yeah, maybe it's Ultimate, yeah.
They're doing one, so it's the fall 2023 one. It's basically take the Amazon Rock from a couple of years ago and give it the new Ultimate Edition Flair torso. And He's not going to be in the red and silver trunks. They've confirmed that, so I'm guessing blue and silver.
Yeah.
If they wanted to get adventurous, they could do like the green and silver that I've either Mandela affected into existence or he wore it like one time and that was it. It's like DX Kane, but with the Rock. I'm definitely interested in that figure. The Amazon exclusive Rock is one of my favorite wrestling figures ever. So you're basically gonna give it a torso that's more accurate proportionally to how Rocky looked. I still have the Amazon Rock, so the one head sculpt that I really like that's not going to be with the new one, I can swap it onto that one anyway. So no complaints here. I just hope I can find it. And also the next Target Ultimate's going to be Brett from Rumble 93. Very excited to pay eBay prices for that.
It's got to have a new head, right?
It's got the SummerSlam 92 head, which in the pictures that Steve from Mattel Action Figure Attack posted doesn't look bad. I mean, it doesn't look great either because it's Mattel doing Bret Hart, but it looks to be the best Bret head yet from them.
So less Tommy Wiseau.
I saw like a screenshot, by the way, of that SummerSlam Bret next to all these other Bret figures Mattel has. Every single one of those Bret figures has like a different head shape. Different facial features, and it's like, I understand if you have a bunch of people draw something, they're all going to have like a different perspective on it. I'm pretty sure if you line 10 motherfuckers up and showed him a Bret Hart picture, he's at least going to have the same like head structure.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, I saw that and I was like, God, they really, and it also illustrates like how bad most of those head sculpts are because they don't look a fucking thing like him. But it's the Macho Man thing, right? Where like if you have the glasses and the fucking hat on him, doesn't actually have to look like him.
I saw a Bret Hart custom on Instagram, and it's just like blew away anything I've seen by Mattel.
You'd think they would put some effort into commissioning a head sculpt from these people that are doing these really nice 3D head sculpts.
Oh yeah.
But why would you do that when you can keep swinging for the fences on all these Bret Hart figures?
Who wants quality products? Come on, it's 2022.
I like the Mattel line a lot more now than I did a couple of years ago because it really felt at one point like they'd started to really figure it out. The Ultimate line debuted, and then it felt, honestly, with all due respect to Bill, who's never going to hear this, it felt like he really wanted to tank that line because, like, why are you doing a $30 Nakamura or a $30 Finn Balor or $30 Ronda? They're good figures, but like, God, they're really missing the mark on what it is collectors actually want. Now they've mostly corrected it because they've expanded the Ultimates line. They're smarter with what legends they're picking for the Elite line for the most part. The figures are really fucking good. And I think part of it is like that first AEW series might have spooked them with how like, God, those figures are actually good the first time out. But yeah, it's crazy how quickly things changed, and they basically, whatever lead that Jazzwares had over them, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, whatever lead Jazzwares had over them, Mattel have absolutely made up for and gained a ton of ground quickly. I will say, though, I do absolutely love the Supreme Kenny Omega figure. That's one of the best wrestling figures ever made. I cannot, however, say that about the Malachi Black in the same series. That figure looks like dog shit. I like Magic. He's a nice guy. Maybe some of that can be blamed on the factory. Probably all of it could be. QT Marshall's fucking everything up. But, like, that is a terrible figure. And it's a 42. If you see it at retail, it's a $42 figure.
That's like $100 Canadian.
Yeah, that's rough. I do like the way the Kenny looks, though, obviously. And the Walmart one's really good, too. The Walmart one's actually got, like, the red gear that he wore when he was champion, like the red and orange shit.
Yeah.
So you could, if you buy the two Supreme Kenny figures, you can basically mix and match like his entire title run, which is cool.
I was when I was at the flea market, the guy there was trying to sell me on AEW figures. I don't know. I don't have any interest in collecting like any current wrestlers. For me, it's all legends. So
I watch AEW. Sometimes I even enjoy the product. I was all in, pardon the expression, on the first series because I thought they looked incredible. Even with like the fucked up skin tones on the first series, I was still like, these are great. I think from series 2, I only got Hangman, that empty-headed fucking dumb fuck, MJF and Moxley. I had all of Series 3, all of Series 4. I don't think I have anybody from Series 5. I think Sheeta's all I've got from Series 6. Nobody from 7. Nobody from 8. I have Kingston, Hobbs, and Starks from 9. Nobody from 10. And I have like barely anybody from like the Unmatched line. I think I have like Unmatched 4 MJF and like half of Series 1. Oh, and Sting from Series 2 because it's Sting.
I would totally buy like
And
a Wolfpack Sting because that's goddamn expensive. So, I wish they would tap into that stuff.
how much is the thing going for now?
God, I have no idea. I just remember looking at it at one time. I was like, no way I'm ever gonna get this.
I have it. I don't really care about it. If I can find all the stuff that came with it, we'll work something out. Yeah. You're not
Okay.
getting my Wolfpack Savage and Nash, though.
Oh, all right. I appreciate it though.
I got to make sure I still have. I know I still have it. I just don't know where it's at. Like the shitty rubber T-shirt that Sting came with,
He has a goatee on
and
that figure, doesn't he?
no,
Oh, I thought he did. Okay.
no, they did. They didn't go full Halloween Havoc '98.
Goddamn goatee
I.
has haunted me for years.
It looks so wrong.
It does.
It's so weird because you never see him with it. Now he's had like the little gimmick he's had for like forever, and you don't kind of like, I guess, so much notice it.
Yeah.
But like the full goatee, that's like a fucking weird look for Steve. What was he doing, man?
That's the one they put in the two key games as well.
Right, because it was in the showcase mode for
Yeah.
the DLC, whatever year that they was a 20. That would have been 2K17. They did Halloween Havoc '98 for Brett and Sting, because Sting went in the Hall of Fame. Sting got 2 Hall of Fame matches in the DLC, didn't he? Because there was a match with Flair
Yeah.
in that sweet fucking Clash arena.
Where they have like instead of the NWA, it's got the NWA font on the ring apron, but instead it says WCW.
Yeah, it's like they did like the NWA logo and then just
Yeah.
like kind of crudely slapped the
Which
WCW
is
logo on top
crazy
of
to
it.
look at.
Yeah, I really liked the way that arena looked. It's a shame that game didn't play better, but I do remember like just doing that match with Flair and Sting in Exhibition, because
Remember,
I don't like the showcase stuff,
no,
if I'm
but
being honest.
remember they had Flair and Fujinami from the Tokyo Dome as well.
Yeah, I screamed when I saw that one because I thought like they're gonna do the Super Brawl match. It's the only match that makes sense. And then like it doesn't say Starrcade in Tokyo Dome. It doesn't have the WCW logo or the New Japan logo on the ring apron or whatever. Then they don't have the New Japan turnbuckles. But I saw that ring and I was like, holy fucking shit, they did it.
Yeah.
I played Fujinami and Danielson in that arena like 10 seconds after I loaded the game up when that DLC was done downloading. That was so much fun. I loved 2K16. That game, the Austin Showcase, facilitated so much content that I have fond memories of being in that game.
Yeah.
And then the Hall of Fame DLC, for the first time since fucking Super Brawl, we get the natural Dustin Rhodes. The one complaint I have is we didn't get WCW Vader until 2 years later. If we had WCW Vader in that game instead of WWF Vader, it'd be like my favorite wrestling game of the modern era, even over Fire Pro World.
Ooh, that's a big claim.
I mean, it had everything. It just didn't have a version of Vader I wanted. I also had like a 36-minute Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart match in that game. So yeah, that submission system was the whole reason why. Because I kept putting that little fucker in sharpshooters, and the little wheel just kept getting away from me. Oh man, but this is going to be by far the longest episode we've done.
I
So we should
know.
probably.
I've got a lot of editing to do.
I'm sorry, man.
No, it's okay.
We
I'm
should,
actually off all next week, so.
For Dave Wishnowski, who once again I thank, for my co-host Liger Busa, and for myself, Mongo. This has been episode 3, right, of
Yeah.
Critical the History of Pro Wrestling Video Games, and we will see you next time, where you will get to hear me talk about SmackDown vs. Raw 2010 for the DS. Take care.